Now, ShapeMaster, I've had the pleasure of working with you in the past. How did you get started with ShapeMaster? What was the premise that led to it?
Right, because as you know, we're based in Champaign County, Illinois. We were very close to University of Illinois. University of Illinois had published a book back in I believe it was in the 80s. And we had a woodworking company, and their book was saying that within 200 miles radius of Champaign-Urbana is a third of the nation's population. And I thought, well, surely there can be a business within a third of the nation's population that could be successful based upon being in the center, of this universe, if you will. And back then, you did not have the internet. You did not have social media. You didn't have a way to really broadcast your business. And you were kind of like a plumber or anybody else. You were advertising in the yellow pages, right? And it was very costly to advertise, very costly to get outside of that radius of just Champaign County. There were a lot of engineers and people here at the University of Illinois in the region that needed plastic molded parts. It was very expensive to do. There virtually was no one at that time going outside of the United States. They were not going to Mexico or China or other places. There really wasn't a cheap alternative. And I said, well, I know something about plastic, having done and worked with it in my woodworking business since about 1981. And this was about 1988. I started researching vacuum forming, which is the process of taking a full sheet of plastic, clamping it into a clamp frame, heating the entire sheet to where it droops and it's very soft, as you understand, and then inserting the mold or forming it into a female tool or over a male tool. Individuals that are familiar with how truck bed liners look, the plastic liners, those are vacuum formed. The inside of your refrigerator is vacuum formed, that liner that's in there. That's vacuum
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. And so my desire was to start a company that would be a very niche business, if you will, that I could do. And I always wanted to do something that would make parts that were smaller than a bread basket, meaning they were lightweight. You could make thousands of them in your shop. It wouldn't take up a tremendous amount of space or have a high overhead per se. So I took about $750 in cash, started in my 3-car garage, and bought an old sign making machine, quickly cut it apart and turned it into what I needed it to be, because I had already sold the job and didn't have a machine to mold plastic on. And that got my name out there and started sort of vaulting me. One of the things I always tell people, if you want to start a business, get to know people that are already doing something in that field that will become your friend, that will trust you, and they know you're not going to try to undermine what they're doing. And I met some friends of mine nearby that own a very large plastic molding company, and they were not threatened by what I was doing. They encouraged me to come in, look at how their machines operated and how they ran. I would go to Chicago to the National Plastics Expo. I would take classes by some of the best instructors in vacuum thermal forming, and they were the best. And they were really the only ones that were teaching, because it wasn't taught in universities or colleges. And the reason it wasn't is our section of the plastics world was always considered a black art, meaning it was very cloak and dagger. People did not want to tell people what they were doing. So every company, like a refrigerator manufacturer, appliance manufacturer, for example, the engineers or the people that learned how to mold plastic in those shops, it was considered, you don't talk about this to anybody else.
Oh, wow.
And it was very secretive. That's not true with injection molding, which is more of a science.
Yes.
Okay. You can take classes on that. You can buy books. Probably still to this day, there's not a whole lot of published books on the subject of vacuum thermal forming. It's very limited, very primitive in what they show you.
Oh, wow.
So I began to work with my friend who was actually the son-in-law of the owner of this very large corporation nearby. And he said, I'm going to teach you some things. And he said, I'll show you kind of where to go. And then I took classes in Chicago at the National Plastics Expo, taught by Bill McConnell at that time. And he had come out of the Air Force, and he was in Texas, happened to be in Texas. He was a pilot, a commercial pilot, and he started doing plastic molding for the military and for some pretty big, unique things, and a lot of research related to that. I kept pushing out, getting to know more people. Some of them were guarded. They didn't really want to show me too much about what they were doing. That's okay. And then I started doing things. And so when you start making things, you find out that you learn what you can and can't make, right? What you can and cannot do. And I started working with some folks who worked for Harley Davidson. They actually had a shop that worked for Harley. And my counselor or friend there said, buy $200 worth of resin systems and ruin it all, meaning play with it, learn how to work with it. Okay. It doesn't matter if you ruin it. That's your lab. That's your personal laboratory, is in your own shop, you know, with the doors closed, no one's watching. You get to learn this stuff. And so I did. And people would say, can you make something? And the answer was, and still today, 35 years later, yes. Now, the real question is, should we at ShapeMaster be doing it? Or could we introduce you to a company, again, within that 200-mile radius of Champaign-Urbana that I know and I trust, and I have vetted them as trustworthy. They will get the work done. It'll be high quality. They'll get it done on time. They'll honor their word on their pricing. Can I direct you to them? Maybe. Or is it a case where there's 10 parts in this assembly and I'm going to make 3 of them? My friends are going to make 2. Somebody else is going to supply 2 or whatever. And we bring it all together for you. And that happens as well.
That's a wonderful homogenous relationship right there.
Yeah, right. It's a synergy. And this is why I always tell young people that are getting into business or wanting to dovetail. I've learned a lot of things sort of the hard way. Years ago, I learned about a very wealthy individual that owned farmland. And a farmer called this person, and the person answered the phone and called the farmer by his first name. She had never canceled out his phone number. She knew him, and he hadn't worked for her in probably 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And she answered the phone, hi, so-and-so. And he was like, wow, she remembers my name. Well, he was in her Rolodex. He was in her speed dial on her cell phone. She was very smart. And I was talking to a friend of mine who was working at a coffee shop, and he's a pilot now, and he's getting into business and doing various things and finishing up his college education. And I told him, I said, never delete the name and the phone number out of the book. I said, those individuals, it's called networking. And somebody may come into your office, into your business and say, hey, do you know an electrician? Do you know a plumber? Do you know somebody that I can rely on? Absolutely. And then you send them 4 or 5 of your friends. It's just called networking. You're not expecting to make any money off that deal, but they remember. And then the day is going to come when they're going to recommend or refer you, right? That's just a good business practice.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I've definitely kept a few names in the book, one being yours as well. I've sent quite a few people that have come to me for a product. I said, I can't make that, but I know a company in Ogden that could definitely help you. And a lot of folks aren't aware that that you're here.
That's right.
And as you stated earlier, thermoforming, especially vacuum forming, is not very heard of.
It's not.
And when I mention it, people, it's like they have no idea what that means. And as you described, most of the things that you see around your home are vacuum formed. Yeah,
there's a lot of vac formed parts in your house that you're not aware of.
Yes.
If you have a crawl space, or if you have a basement window and there's this clear plastic cover over it that was vacuum formed, as an example. A lot of the things in the lawn and garden department are vacuum formed. I actually had a fellow call me one time. This has been, I don't know, probably 25 years ago. And he said, hey, I'm over here at the university, and he said, I've got this invention, and we'd like to have it prototyped. Do you think you could help me? Absolutely. Okay. So I scheduled an appointment to go see him. He said, it's a funny thing. I said, what's that? He goes, I found you on the internet. I said, well, that's wonderful. That's good. My website's working for me, He said, yeah, but the funny thing is I live right down the street from your business in Ogden, Illinois, and I drive right past your place every day.
Oh, wow.
And I said, maybe I need a bigger sign. I got a pretty big sign. It's like, but that's the point, is people are not paying attention to what's around them.
Yeah.
They're paying, we have come to learn. We had our first website in 97.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And I've been selling on eBay, my eBay store, since about 96, 97. And we're global. And what's interesting is people in your own backyard find you on the internet.
Yeah. And
they have no clue that you're just right there.
That is incredible.
Yeah. And so we sell globally. We have recently, within the last, 3 months, signed a contract with an organization in the Netherlands to represent our Teflon product line that sells to labware. And they represent us to all of Europe and all of Asia.
Oh, wow.
And a year and a half ago, we struck up a relationship with a company similar to them that sells to the semiconductor, or Silicon Valley, chips, computer chips, all of that. Many of those are being manufactured, especially in research, by all the big guys, all the big names out there who we're selling to, including NASA Goddard Space Flight, Los Alamos Labs, Lawrence Livermore, MIT. We sell them all. And that all started because of a University of Illinois student that came and toured my facility. I don't even remember when. He remembered me and said, Ken, can you make me this one piece? And I did, put it on the website. And then people started calling and said, could you make us one?
Wow.
We now have well over 100 SKUs in our product line. And most of them, not all of them, but most of the new ones that are coming in are all customized.
Oh, wow.
And we signed a contract. I started saying about a year and a half ago, developed a relationship with the folks in Australia. And then they introduced us to the folks in Netherlands.
Wow.
So isn't that interesting?
I love it.
So the networking that's going on around the world, So we work for the world's largest pharmaceutical type companies, making trays for cryogenics applications, a lot of seed germination trays. We're shipping those to we just quoted in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City, we just quoted one of their offices. We are probably shipping to 9 or 10 locations globally for that application, which is fun because that started in 2012, 2013 when I developed that tray. So we keep your tooling here. It's your tooling. It belongs to you. It's on the shelf. And then when you call and order more product, we quote, in case plastic's gone up or labor's gone up, because we work for people for decades. We have clients we've worked for ongoing for over 25, now 20. See, one company we started working for in 97. So, you're at 28 years. That longevity proves a lot of things.
Yes.
It proves that, one, you're a stable company, you honor your word, you get the work done, you get it done on time for the price you agreed to, and they know that they can rely upon you. And so then the goal is, as you grow and you just keep putting sort of pillars underneath the roof of your portico, if you will, to sort of support what you're doing, your goal in business then is to then push out that new process or technology. And so as we would add software, or as we would add a new machine or a new type of machine, and we got into 3D printing and all kinds of things like that, of course, injection molding, you would then send a postcard out and remind your existing customers, because your best new opportunities come from your current clients, your current customers, right? So you want to go out, if you will, you want to mine that resource first. You want to let them know they already have working accounts with you. You've already given them credit. Some clients you may give 30, 60, 90 days to pay. It depends on how you want to run your business. But all they have to do is enter a purchase order with you. You're already a vendor to them. So then when you come in and say, I have 3 new processes, or I have 3 new machines, I have 3 new types of things to offer you. You're used to us doing thermal forming or this type of process. Now we're doing CNC machining. We can machine aluminum, machine plastic, machine steel. We can do metal welding, plastic welding, all these things that we've added over the years. You do a media blitz, if you will. You send out postcards or you call people, however you want to do it. A lot of people, just like myself, you don't really want to be harangued and bothered today. You don't mind necessarily an email coming in. You don't mind a paper postcard coming in through the U.S. Postal Service. I don't mind it. I kind of like to look at that, and it's kind of nice. And then especially if you include a business card. I know business cards are sort of passé, but they're really not. They're kind of nice to have. You can put it in your desk. You can put it in a Rolodex. And you go, hey, I know a guy, or I know of a person. And somebody comes in, this happens to me all the time. They'll come in, hey, do you know anybody that does this or offers that? Just a second, let me check this. Yeah, somebody's come by. And you get out your business card, you take a picture of it and give it to them. They take a picture of it or whatever. If you have a couple of them, you hand them a card. That's networking, of course, and that's a really nice thing to do for folks. Yeah, but that's that symbiotic method of kind of growing things over the years. And then, you have to learn, which of your friends are really good at something? Some of them are really good at one thing, not so good at another. And what I mean by that is, and that's the same thing true with even your own company. You're going to go, well, I specialize in this. I'm really good at this, this, and this, but I can do these other things. Now, is that for me to offer to you? It depends. It may be price. It may be the fact that I'm only 10 miles from you, and that's really good for shipping, right? You'd rather buy from me. I may be 5% higher, but I'm a whole lot cheaper than shipping it from California. Okay?
Right.
Those are the things that the client has to decide. Well, the same thing is true with all these other auxiliary businesses that you know. They have things that they're really good at, and they have things that they're not so good at, but they can do it. And they may, when I say not so good at it, their prices may not be so good. Their lead time may not be so good, but they really do good work. And you go, hey, I don't mind paying 15% more because I trust you guys. You do all my other work in this area. You know, it's just like going to an auto mechanic.
Right.
Trust, right? And I have an interesting story to tell you. I used to have cast aluminum tools made, and they used plaster casting, which is different from sand casting.
Yeah.
And I got to know these guys, and they were called Accurate Cast. They don't exist anymore. They were up in Chicago. I believe they were in Addison, and they actually had the distinction of operating out of the building where the hula hoop had been manufactured, which is really cool if you think about that, right? So I got to know them. They were really cool people, and never met the founder. He had passed away before I got there, but his son and son-in-law were operating the business. And they made cast aluminum tools for thermoforming for my industry. That's why I was there. And within the aluminum cast tool is tubing. And that tubing has to be bent, and you have, like a radiator, you have to have these circular end caps made out of tubing, different sizes, different diameters, and then you would solder the tubing in, and you would put all that into the aluminum casting, and that's how you heat the tool, and that's how you cool the tool when it's got hot plastic against it. So inside an aluminum cast tool for vacuum forming and for other processes is this whole plumbing system, which is amazing, and it adds to the cost of the tool. Well, somebody in the Chicagoland area said, hey, we need some of these pieces made. They're, a C shape, bell housings on them. You can make them out of 1/2 inch or whatever diameter tubing. They said, well, yes, we've made them for you before. We can continue to make them for you. They're kind of pricey because our tooling is kind of at the extreme end of the diameter that we can do. So we don't mind. Your pricing is just fine. Your quality is great. And so they ordered it from again and again and again. So my friend was at a trade show in Chicagoland, and he happened to find a vendor that was within Chicagoland that was really gifted at making that size of tubing. They had the right equipment, they could make it. And so he got a bid from them, and they could make it for less money. So my friend went over to his customer and he said, here's a bid from not really a competitor, but somebody I found at a trade show that I think you should go work with. Don't you want to do our parts? No, it's not that I don't want to do your parts. They can do them for a fraction of the price, maybe 40%.
Oh,
less.
wow. Yeah.
And they're good. They're good quality. But they have the equipment that's really sized for that. Mm-hmm. We will continue to do your parts, but we really think you ought to save the money and go there. We have never seen anything like that, they said. His customer said, you're giving business away? You're giving work away? Well, I'm just saying, this is not really our forte. We make cast aluminum tooling, but this cooling system and the method of making these copper pipes, we can make for our customers, and we can make them for you, but these guys are really good at it. That's what they do. They said, well, thank you. You're blowing our mind that you're willing to give business away. Well, you're our customer. We respect you, and we want to help you save money. And so they did. They took their business there. And they were, pleased with the quality, pleased with the price. Here's where it's interesting. My friends were people of such honor that they got to talking, and they said, all those years, all that time, we were charging them this much. They could have been paying this much. They wrote them a check for $10,000.
Oh, wow.
Took it to them, and they said, we didn't overcharge you because we charged you what we needed to make. But we feel that you deserve a refund for part of that. And they gave them a check of their own volition, gave them a check. And they said, never in all of our years of doing business have we ever seen something like this.
That is incredible.
Isn't that amazing? So again, that's what breeds that honesty and that respect, and that breeds that relationship, that breeds that respect for that kind of action, and that just reverberates,
Yes.
amongst the business community. People say, "I know I can trust you." I had a friend of mine years ago that told me that a local farmer, very wealthy businessman farmer, he had learned there was a woman whose husband had passed away, and he had a tractor, really nice tractor. And my friend went to her and he said, if you're ready to sell that tractor, because I know you're selling out, you're selling the house, you're selling everything, I will be happy to purchase the tractor from you and the equipment, because I like that and I'd like to have it, but feel free to do whatever you want. So she said, okay. So she kind of come up with a price and went to him and said, well, how about $3,400? And he said, nope. That tractor is worth $6,000 and I will not pay you less than that.
Oh, wow.
And see, that's the kind of thing that shows you the honor of the person. So what I have determined in business, I've started 2 companies, my wife and I, since 1981 when we got married. The first one was woodworking company, Trees of the Field Woodworking. We did that. Basically, we continued the operation of doing woodworking even through the early 90s when I had started the plastics business, because you always, no matter what revenue stream you have, and in business, especially when you're a small operator, you want to continue the revenue streams as best as you can, because they will help you launch that next company, right? And sometimes there's some overlap between this type of company and that type of company. And there was with woodworking, that became my pattern making abilities for doing vacuum forming and doing the work here with casting and making tooling. So I'm a woodworker and a craftsman first, and doing quality handmade furniture, which was what I was doing. Not a lot of call for it. You have to be in an area of the country where there's a lot of people that have an appreciation and have the money. And don't want to just jet off to Italy to buy their furniture as they were doing. Central Illinois was not known for individuals that could either afford the furniture or really wanted it. Most of my friends that were really good at what they did, and I was good at what I did. We were, I feel like I was on par with them. They had much larger shops. Everything they did came out of Chicago. They were working for all these Chicago, that base, because there was a pool of money. That's cool. I didn't have the contacts or the outreach, and I really didn't want to go up there and do massive installs, which they were doing. So the reason I say all that is that in neither company did I ever go and take business away from somebody else to grow the business I was doing. My philosophy was my talents and my abilities will stand on their own.
Yes.
So I don't recommend to people, if they're working for a company, that they leave that company and take business away from their employer. I mean, I've known people that done that. It's usually not very successful, but it's, so when individuals come here and try to help promote ShapeMaster, I always tell them, I'm not going to go out and try to undercut somebody else a dime or a dollar or anything. I always say, dance with the one who brought you, be loyal to the business person that brought you into this, and fund them. Now, if that company that has been servicing you has either going out of business, and that happens, or they are transitioning to a different technology, and that happens, or they're not meeting your obligations on time, delivery, or the prices, maybe they've escalated their prices, that's fine, then I will bid it. But I'm not looking for you to move the tooling and move that project to me. I didn't start the business based upon taking business away from anybody, and I don't try to grow my business based upon that. So that's a bit of advice that I give to young people. Yeah. And when I say young, I don't necessarily mean young in age, young in that you may be 40 or 50 years old and you're just now starting your business, so you're young in business. And I met with somebody here recently who lost his job, and he had been about 20 years in a field and was just kicked to the street, basically. And it's really kind of sad. And he and another person that worked in the company, and it was all computer related industry. And so he started a company, and that's great, and doing consulting work. And I said, that's great. I'm trying to help him network now, get his name out there. That's very much a regional business, probably within a 45 miles of where you live that you would want to travel, I always recommend to people that if you are going to travel, try to keep your outreach within about 200 miles so that you can drive there in the morning, maybe service the customer, meet with them or whatever, and drive back, or they can come to see you, especially if you have a shop.
Yeah.
You're actually making something. About 200 miles out is reasonable for you to be able to do and not have to spend a night in a hotel or be on the road, right? But anyway, that's kind of some of the things I have learned. I really am pro internet, pro business. I am pro 3D printing. It is a technology that is only going to improve and expand. We do have numerous 3D printers here. They have become so dirt cheap and high quality.
Yes.
You could put 20 or 30 of them in a room, as many people do. And I've seen this done at the university and laboratories that are business laboratories, that are incubators for a company that's launching. And it's crazy to walk in a room and see 20 or 30 or 50 machines running, and they're making many of the same part because sometimes it'll fail to print, right? And so they'll print 6 parts and only get 4 good ones, but they only needed 2 or 3, at this time around. And it's fun to me to see what's happened with that sort of niche. It really is.
It really has. The 3D printing world has really exploded. I have several friends that have quit their jobs and have started printing. Some of them, they'll run some of their designs they'll pass them through me because of my experience in manufacturing.
Sure.
And some of the things that they create are absolutely incredible.
Oh, yeah.
I love how folks are making their own tools.
Yes, right.
I even saw a fellow that had a 3D printer, but it was a welder.
Yeah.
It's printing in metal.
Sure.
And he was making his own parts for his race car with it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That was absolutely phenomenal.
It is. It really is. I look to see the metal come on more and more. I had a friend of mine that had leased a printer, a metal printer. I thought he had bought it, and he had leased it, and it was very expensive, but probably one of the best, in the nation, in the world. He was making parts for SpaceX.
Wow.
So that has to be really good, right?
Yeah.
But I really hope that a lot of your small makers, and they are globally, they're continuing to push that envelope. When that became open source, when the software and a lot of the technology became open source, and then you began to see the international manufacturing of components, anybody can buy the parts to build their own 3D printer now.
Yep.
They can. I question why you would, unless you want to build something very unusual, okay?
Yes.
Something maybe that's going to run a 20-foot part, and you're going to have that printer going back and forth. That's cool. You want to build your own, because it's not out there, not commercially available right now. That's fine. We sell 80/20, as you know, aluminum extrusion system.
Love that stuff.
It's American made.
Oh.
It's got some really great things I can talk about. I knew the Woods family that started the company.
Oh, wow.
I go back to 1992 and 93 with them. And I always peg it to when my daughter was, my wife was pregnant with my daughter, which was 31 years ago. And I was at a trade show, and I was vending, and this salesman came through who became a really good friend of mine. He was from St. Louis, and he said, you need to take a look at this. And I go, dude, that's like stupid, crazy expensive. I can't afford it, because I was building a new vacuum forming machine. And he said, no, you need to seriously consider this. And I said, dude, I can get it welded out of steel for less by a local machine shop that I work with. No, I'm not going to give up. You're going to play with this stuff, and you're going to build your new thermal former out of it. So then he came by my shop one day, and he threw down a piece of paper. He said, sign that. What am I signing? He said, you're going to become a distributor.
Oh, wow.
I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, they're impressed with you. They want to encourage you to build your new product line. He thought I was going to mass produce these 3D printers, these vacuum forming machines. And there would have been a consideration to do that at the time. And so I designed it, I built it, all out of 80/20. One of the owner, well, in fact, it was the owner's son who was a partner, came by this shop. We were in the midst of building it. And he said, if that machine vibrates apart when you're making it, I will give you all your money back for it. That's how strongly he believed in his product line. Of course, it never vibrated apart. It's a really good product. I have built clean rooms, gigantic clean rooms out of it in factories. I have built guarding for companies in Memphis, Tennessee. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah. I came in shortly after that project was finished.
We went to Tennessee and did a huge install for a major pharmaceutical company. And that was 3 different trips down there. It took a crew of 10 people,
Holy
2 different times. It was huge, working 14, 16 hours a day. But it's still a great product. It's still one of my most favorites to work with. We're still doing, builds and different things, and we can do anything people want to with it. I call it sort of the boys' toys, where you take the catalog and you're just dreaming out of what you can make out of it, But 80-20 mixed with plastics, our machining capabilities, our creative designing capabilities. And that's why people will still come to us for solutions in that. And that's why I say ShapeMaster is a solution company.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean?
We bring a solution. When you come with the problem, we'll say, okay, yeah, we can figure it out one way or another. So
one of the things that I've spoke to a lot of about ShapeMaster after I left was what Jim Walthall was working on with 3D scanning and printing with the German Messerschmitt airplane Iran tool and things like that. I find that fascinating, especially when we're talking about the advent of the 3D printer and the ability to scan an airplane and then basically back engineer what's supposed to go inside that airfoil and then create that rib. That to me was fascinating.
Well, that's right. And what that proved was the accuracy of the scanner.
Yes, exactly.
It was amazing. And he actually caught it wasn't the intent, but he ended up catching the thin thickness of the sheet metal was caught in the details of the scanner.
Oh, wow.
As the metal laid over. And the wing was set, like this, and he just digitally scanned it. The other thing that we did for them as a proof of concept was there was a water jacket component that was on the motor that was corroded. We took it here. We had permission to bring it. It was made out of magnesium. We digitally scanned it. We turned it into a SolidWorks file that we gave to them, and we corrected or fixed the corrosion that had occurred when, as I understand it, this was a Nazi warbird and it flew against the Russians, is my understanding. The Russians had shot it down. The Nazis tried to cannonball it and sink it into a pond over there.
Oh, wow.
And a Navy aviator from America who had made a lot of money in his life wanted one of these to restore and fly. But he did not want a bird that had fired on the Allies.
Oh, okay. That's understandable.
So this machine had not gotten properly sunk in the pond, as I understand it. It was discovered, but it was corroded. So it had to be completely dismantled and rebuilt, basically. This particular component, we scanned it. We turned it into a SolidWorks file from the digital scanning. We fixed the corrosion, and then we 3D printed it.
Wow.
And the purpose was then to measure the 3D printing to see how accurate it matched the corroded part. And it did. It was spot on.
Wow.
So then by handing those files to the company that was rebuilding it, they could then choose if the client wants to recreate these parts the way they were made originally by Germany and by the producers of the plane, they would then have it lost wax cast or a foundry, right?
Yeah.
Or you could build it, machine it, but that's not the way it was made then.
Right.
But you have your choice, right? There are people out there that are well-known. I won't mention names, but they're Hollywood and comedians from California that have their own shows, and they have cars and collectibles, right? They have been doing digital scanning to replicate parts that were damaged or broken, gears, for years. And that's where I first saw some of their work, and I bought one of those digital scanners for the purpose of recreate, because they proved, they said it's working for us. I thought, okay, it'll work for us. The technology is out there to where what I'm going to say is your average homeowner maker or that has a shop can buy a handheld digital scanner. One of our employees here is an engineer, and he has his own model company. He goes around to city parks that have tanks in parks, and he digitally scans them so that he can turn that into a 3D printed model, and he sells those.
That's
incredible.
Them,
obviously. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And he came up with that. He just started that on his own.
Oh, yeah.
That is incredible.
It is.
Wow.
So I see the ability and the birthing of conceptual stuff that you can do, not only with 3D printing, but with digital scanning out there that the average person can do in their home. And you can birth a company just out of that.
Absolutely.
Sell on Etsy, sell wherever.
Absolutely.
You know, I think it's fun. I really do. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and those handheld 3D scanners have come across my emails here recently. And it's something that I've considered. I may, in fact, invest in a 3D printer this year after we get the new shop built and everything. And that would be very, very, very fun, especially for car parts, older vehicles that, me personally, we could buy them. It's just like at Woodwork, I could buy or I could make it myself. It just depends on how much free time I got and if I want to learn something new.
Yeah. I always tell people when you're going to start a business or you're going to do something, you have a couple different things, right? You have time and you have money.
Yeah.
If you have more time and you have money, well, then use your time to make the things, right? If you have more money than you have time, that's when it starts to shift. And that's the way ShapeMaster has been over the years. In the beginning days, we had to build our own machines, right? We had to build our own tools. And one of the things I always tell people, because it doesn't always go without saying, this is a bit of education, especially to people starting. So you have a job, or maybe you have a part-time job. Maybe been a college student, or you're wanting to start a part-time business, part-time gig, or whatever. Just like years ago, I always thought it was funny, college students that were painting houses. So they have the summers off. They would go paint houses, and they would recruit college students to go paint houses, and that built into a business, out of the whole thing. Well, so let's say you've got a situation where you can save a little bit of money and you can buy enough tools, and maybe they're not the most expensive tools. Maybe you pick them up at garage sales or off Facebook Marketplace or something like that, and you start assembling your little shop at home, and then you get a job to do, and then you take all of that money because you don't need it. You take all that money because you already have a job, you already have income, let's say. You take all of that money from that revenue stream, from that part-time thing, making things for a client or whatever, and you plow it back into either more tools or new tools. Maybe you sell the tools you have, you trade them, and you keep building up. The day comes, like with us in manufacturing, and this has been true for a lot of big thermoformers as well, because they would build a lot of their own bigger thermoformers themselves. They had to. Or they chose to, or they would buy an old machine, a wrecked machine, they would tear it down, they would save all the goodies, the big goodies, and then they would rebuild the machine. I've watched this in big companies. I've watched them. They had their own guys out there welding and cutting and fabricating because they were good at it, and that would be the equivalent of a $500,000 thermoformer that they probably bought for 50 grand used, and they rebuilt it for 100 grand. They used their own employees to do it, but then now they know how that machine was built. Yeah. Right? It's like Henry Ford or anybody else that maybe designed and built their first cars before they had an assembly line. They know how to repair it. They built it, right? So that's a positivity thing that you can do for yourself in your own shop, is put your own fixtures together, learn how to build them and rebuild them. So then as you springboard, what tends to happen is you then have more money than time. So then you start going to professional machine builders that maybe you once wished you could afford. And now you place an order for them and you dictate how you want them to build it. You buy all the accessories or whatever. And we have an example of that on our floor. I ordered out a new Mac, which is built up in Crystal Lake, Illinois. Oh, wow. I know the owners of the company. They build all the machines for WeatherTech, as an example, from what I can see. And they build beautiful machines, really good technology on their machines. I've always been impressed with Mac. And so I've had them build 2 new machines for me and all the best technology. That's awesome. So what used to when you couldn't afford a $5,000 machine, you had to build your own machines. Now you're buying $80,000 to $250,000 machine, having somebody else build it for you, because simply you don't have the time to build those kinds of machines. And now technology is such where you don't have the ability to put the technology in it either, right? You just don't. You'd really have to have a lot of, you'd have to have some cute computer science guys and, your mechanical engineers and all that. And through the years, when Jim was here with us, and he was with us a long time before he retired, and I turned him loose. I had designed the stainless steel caging for the University of Illinois for piglets. And you've seen those that we've built. We've shipped them to New Zealand. We've shipped them to UC Davis. Wow. But one of the largest laboratories, probably still the one that is here on campus at Pencil, And I was building the caging systems and all the plastics, all the stainless steel, and doing all that. Then they wanted to automate the feed, a liquid feed, right?
Yeah.
And I did not have the time to put into that myself, but Jim wanted to come in and work with us. And I said, I'm going to introduce you to the professor, to the doctor over there. You're going to work with him on this. Do you feel like you're up for this? And he said, yep, no problem. And we tied into it, and we built the initial system. We then were asked to upgrade it when some of his benefactors asked to change the way the pig received the diet. And then we became known for what we did. And a few years later, a professor from Kansas State University came in, K-State, and they asked us to do a granular feeding system.
Oh, wow.
So instead of a liquid diet, granular. And that's out there now. Gigantic pig mazes, which are like the traditional eye-shaped maze that you use for mice. We built a very large one for baby pigs probably 25 years ago at the U of I. We became rather famous for that. And now we've built a giant one for full-size pigs. And when I say full-size pigs, a human can walk through this.
Holy wow.
Yeah, it's like 16 feet by 16 feet. It's 8 pods. And we commercialize. Wow. So we license our technology from both the University of Illinois and Kansas State, and we commercialize this and can sell it any place where you can legally sell it.
That's technology. Impressive. Yeah, I do remember the pig deprivation tanks as well.
Right.
Those were pretty fun. And when Mrs. Wakefield was working on the harness to hold the piglets up, and the monocle was one of the funniest things to go around. The
pig looked like Batman, didn't he? He had this mask on, When I remember walking into the lab, and the professor looked at me and he said, and he had 2 guys in from the Netherlands or someplace that brought their technology that blended with and he was buying their computer software, I think, and the technology. And he said, what you're witnessing is the first time in human history this has ever been done.
Yes.
So on our equipment, on ShapeMaster equipment at the University of Illinois, at K-State, and at other facilities around the world, it's cool to know that the first time in the history of mankind, the research has been done using our equipment that we developed for those applications, and it can be commercialized to the world.
That's absolutely impressive.
It is.
And ShapeMaster is full of those unique things, especially like the thermoforming machine that you spoke of earlier that you built with the 8020.
Yeah.
That to me was absolutely impressive. And using the machine, it is. You probably still have it to this day.
Oh yeah, we're still running it.
It's
absolutely,
an absolutely impressive machine. One off. I love that the fact that something that can come from a small company like this, and isn't given that credit's not going to just a large corporation that really doesn't deserve it, and is really not going to put in that interpersonal communication that you have with your customers.
Yeah, it's fun. It really is fun.
Yeah.
What's really neat is when you bring in engineers from other companies, and they'll say, hey, we got a project at research and development down here, and we really don't want to give this to anybody else. Because we'd like to come up there and help and work with you while you're running it. Will you allow us in your shop? And I will, when of course, they're already trained in safety. They don't necessarily run the machine, but they'll be right there.
Yeah.
And I've had individuals come in and work with me, or work alongside us, and we actually will run it on that prototype machine.
Yes.
Which is fun.
Yes, it is. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a day that we were working on the Arizona solar car race. The tinted dome that went over their car.
Yeah.
I was 6 hours, no lunch break, but I really didn't think about lunch because it was so fascinating.
It is.
And you get caught up in the moment, especially having those people there with you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're all caught up in a moment. That's you can't recreate. Nowhere can you recreate that moment.
No, that's right.
And right here at ShapeMaster, here in the small town in Illinois, in Ogden, it's just absolutely impressive to me.
Yeah, I always say we're the best kept secret.
I agree.
People say, I have no idea what was here, especially when we give tours, plant tours, and we do, it's a dog and pony show, right?
Yeah.
We have all our machines running, and we're showing you different things. We give away gifts and give away things that we make. And people come through and they go, I had no idea this was here. I said, well, when I was a kid or a teenager, because I just lived 4 miles down the road, if this had been here then, I would have worked for free.
Yes.
Just to be able to learn this. And that brings me to another subject. So when you have the ability in a small company, it's really wonderful to add software and technology, meaning sort of the machinery to go with that. And we've done that with Mastercam, which is your programming software for your CNCs. And when I have individuals come in and we can dedicate them the time of their career and their schedule to learn either SolidWorks or Mastercam and running the CNCs. I like to see their eyes light up in learning how this works, because it adds tools to their personal toolbox and their abilities. And I like to see them dive in.
Yes.
And it used to be that you would send people away for training. I sort of tend to bring my former employees back that are retired to do some training of our existing staff, our new staff. But anymore, you can get on YouTube.
Yes.
And you can watch training videos and say, okay, I've got SolidWorks open here. I'm going to learn how to draw a solid, and I'm going to learn how to make a print. And I will work with them myself. And I say, okay, here's how. So we do a lot of plastic trays. And so it may be each week I'll draw 3 new designs for plastic trays for 3 different clients. And so what I'll do is I'll draw the tray in a solid model. I'll save it. Maybe I'll save it as a JPEG, as a PDF, because they can open it easily.
Yeah.
Most people, even corporations, they can't open up CAD software, okay? The engineering department can if they have that software, but many times they don't even have an engineering department. So what we'll do is we'll save a print with dimensions, and then of course we just draw a line on there and put an X and say sign to approve it. And so we'll send out the PDF. If you like the design and you like the CAD models that we saved as JPEGs, and we can actually send them an e-drawing download, which is free. Anybody in the world can download e-drawings. It's on the SolidWorks website for free. And that you can't design in that, but you can look at CAD models.
That's handy.
It's very handy.
That's handy, especially if they can have a 3-dimensional overview of what that product looks like.
Yeah.
It's almost as good as having it in your hands.
It is. It's almost like reaching out and holding it.
Exactly.
So I'll tell them, look, it doesn't harm your computer, as this is downloaded probably a bazillion times. Download the free e-drawings viewer. I'm sending you a CAD file. This is actually I'm working for you. I sent you the CAD file. It's yours to have. And then they can open it up, they can rotate it, they can measure it, they can look it over, and then they can look at the print. And if they say, edit this, edit that, or let's go, then they sign it, they give approval, they give a purchase order. So now how we got to that point normally in the business relationship is they've already agreed to do the project, right? And they've signed for the design side of things. And one thing that I do that a lot of companies didn't do, when I got into the business, I found this out. A lot of companies, especially in injection molding and thermal forming and stuff through the years, I considered it kind of a pirating method.
Okay.
They would sell you the tooling and sell you, what it took to make the parts. But if you called for the tooling back, they would say, no, it belongs to us.
Oh, wow.
Or they would never say that they charged you for the tooling. They would charge you for a setup fee or something. And I don't like that. And so people would always ask, now, does that tooling belong to us? Yes. Now, I will keep it insured. I will keep it clean. I will keep, as you know, I keep it in a warehouse that it's dry. It's not going to rust. It's maintained. It's inventoried. As long as you keep buying parts from me, because I'm not going to warehouse it for free. But some people, they were afraid, because what would happen is when a customer, when they would call for their tooling, they would say, no, we're not sending it back or whatever, or they would lose it if the company shut down, they would lose their tooling. And this happens when you're doing business with other countries, with businesses in other countries. You can't physically go there and look at your tooling and look at what you've just put $10 or $15 or $20,000.
Yeah, they could be storing it outside on their porch.
Oh, absolutely.
Alongside of a walkway, somewhere.
It could be stolen.
Yeah.
And many times in history, I've had friends of mine tell me that they had people that would actually steal their aluminum tools and stuff and recycle them. They'd find them being turned in at the recycling center.
What a shame.
And it was like, you just stole tools that belong to clients,
Yeah.
So I've always been careful where that's concerned to make sure that people understand they own the tooling, but they're also responsible for it, that if they no longer are going to run it, if they've obsoleted the product, that's fine. Just let us know, and then they have to pay to ship it back, or they have to sign to have it disposed of, and then we'll dispose of it. And one of my friends who does injection molding, what he tells people is if you don't want your tooling, that's fine. Sign a release form. And what he would do through the history, he's 86 years old. He's done this all of his life. He would then have it recycled, the aluminum recycled, and donate it all to the Boy Scouts.
That's awesome.
That was just his method of.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a cool thing to do, right? So we've basically what I've done with it is we just recycle it. What doesn't bring a lot, I put it in a fund, and then we have a party for the employees.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it pays for some special event or something.
You guys, you don't just have pizza parties either. You guys cater some good food.
We have done that, yeah. And during the COVID lockdown here in Illinois, our restaurants here were suffering so badly, and they weren't even making it. They were basically going broke. And what I would do is we were deemed essential, but we would come in and a full crew. So at least one day of the week, I would go to one of the restaurants here in our small town, and I would have them cater it. And we might be like 12 or 15 meals, and then I'd give them a $150 tip.
That's awesome.
Because we were making money. We were doing well during that time.
That's good.
They were suffering. You want to take care of your friends and your businesses around you, and they remember that. They still, to this day, they'll tell me we remember what you guys did. And it wasn't just us. There were grain elevators and other big businesses around here. They could see.
They understood the assignment.
Yes, my friends are suffering. We're not going to let them suffer. We're going to help them out. And that meant a lot to me to see the community come together.
Absolutely.
Where, the government didn't care for the small businesses, but the small business owners know how to take care of one another.
We lost a few small restaurants, especially over in Sidell. Not a lot of folks around here are delivered to these small towns, and they were delivering a lot of small towns.
Yes.
And that pandemic, it pretty much, they had no choice but to close their doors.
Yeah, I know a lot of the people down there in Sidell. I knew them, and I felt so bad for them. I really did.
Good folks.
Well, what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of folks start in the food business. They do it out of their savings. Maybe they're older and they've done it out of some retirement money or money they saved. And that is a tough business.
It is.
It is. And right now with the cost of food, of just your supplies being so high. I asked a friend of mine that has a restaurant locally, I said, dude, how many eggs go in your omelets? He said, 3. He said, Ken, he said, those eggs were costing me 6 cents a piece just X number of months ago. Now they're 65 cents a piece.
Holy cow.
He's dropping $2 just on eggs, let alone all the other escalation of cheese and everything else, right? And so when you look at the prices at a restaurant, they're not gouging you. They're just simply having to recover the costs that they're paying. And it's tough.
It is.
It's a tough business. I know it is. And, I was going to start in 2018 and 2019, I counseled with some bankers, and I wanted to open up a motorcycle dealership in Champaign. And I had guys flew in from New York. There was 4 brands that were part of their corporation, all from Italy. And my goal was to open it up close to campus and sell scooters and stuff, and then do motorcycle training and different things like that.
That would be nice.
Yeah, have a European clothing and food, and on Friday and Saturday nights, be open till midnight, just have a good time. Well, anyway, my bankers told me back then, in 2018 and 2019, don't do anything in business related to food or retail. And I thought, this is a sort of a weird omen that, he said, don't do it. I said, okay. And so I stayed out of it. Glad I did now.
Yeah, no kidding.
But some college universities are very pro scooter.
Yeah.
They don't mind their kids riding scooters. Unfortunately, the football coach up here years ago, when he came in, one of them, not this one, he was very anti-scooter, would not let the football players ride scooters. I guess he came from a school where they had guys getting hurt. Okay, whatever. Gosh. But anyway, and I knew right then I would be fighting an uphill battle. Yeah. If the university was going to be pushing back on scooters, it's like, And it's sad because up in Iowa, there's a university up there where they don't charge you you don't have to for a, what is the CC size? It's 50 CC and down. You don't have to get a license.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And they have just thousands of scooters on campus all over the place, man. And they welcome the parking and stuff. And it reduces your parking footprint. It makes sense. But those
scooters are extremely fuel efficient.
Oh goodness, 125 miles to the gallon. They're awesome. You can haul 2 kids on them. But anyway, just in business general, I've seen a lot of businesses rise and fall. And over the basically nearly 43 years that my wife and I have been owning and operating companies in Champaign County, I've watched a lot of what I call the long-bearded companies that were here in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and they passed it down to the son and grandson. I've watched many of them, and some of them are still here. Some of them new, obviously under new ownership, still thriving, and I love to see that. I got a phone call from a friend that I went to high school with in St. Joseph. He worked at the IGA store with me and remembered that I was doing plastic vacuum forming. And I don't know when I had last saw him. I mean, I don't even know if it's been probably 40 years since I've even seen him. And he called me out of the blue. He said, hey, I work at this company up here in Chicagoland, and they build equipment. And he said, we're getting ready to switch over. We wanted to have thermoform plastic panels for all of our machines. And I remembered you, and I thought, wow. And so, again, it wasn't because he found me on the internet. It wasn't, he probably did look us up, and then he called us. And so we had a great visit. And then he told me who the company was. I went out and looked at their stuff. And then he started to send me some CAD models this week. So, like you said, you never know.
You never know
where your business is going to come from.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I've had quite a few really, I don't know. It's like the imposter syndrome sets in. I don't know about for you when you first started, but the business side, the woodworking and part of Memories wood shop that I opened hasn't done quite as well as it in the last year than it had the first year. Yeah. I'm assuming it's because of the economy.
It is.
That, and like you said, the niche or want for handmade furniture, especially in this area, is very little that I've noticed anyway. But reaching out, I've had companies like Prairie Gardens reach out to me. I didn't advertise. Right. They heard through word of mouth that I was building a new run of planer boxes and they wanted them in their stores.
That's cool.
Unfortunately, during the negotiation, I would have lost money. And I can't do that. And I told them, and they argue with me over the materials and things like that, as well as, a few other places, Danville Gardens, they argue with me over prices. And I realize, maybe I'm in the wrong area, or maybe I've just come at it at the wrong time.
Yeah, honestly, it's tough. It just is. I always tell people, in fact, we had somebody from California that is building mailboxes. Okay?
Oh, wow.
And they got a good product line out there, and they wanted the pull-out drawer.
Yes.
Okay. And they said, we want something like this. I'm going, that's commercially available. Yeah, but we'd like to have our own. Well, yeah, everybody wants their own. I get it. And so we did quote it. We actually quoted injection molding. Well, they didn't want to pay for the tooling, and I get it. They don't have the volume and sales yet. That's okay. That's okay. Just remember us. Remember us when you do, because you will one day. But it's tough doing retail.
Yes.
That's why I recommend that if somebody's in the maker space, that I have a friend of mine that's doing this. Go to the better shows. Okay, set up in the parking lot. Go to the better shows for furniture and quality items like that. One place that I highly recommend that you look at and others look at, and it's fun stuff, go to a company like locally in Champaign called PACA, P-A-C-A.
Okay. And
what they do is they take reclamation that comes out of houses that are being torn down in buildings.
Okay.
And one of the fun things I've had one of my former employees do, he would, believe it or not, he would go to the local, I don't even know what they're called, but it's basically a place where people dump trees and wood, and then they grind it up and make mulch and stuff. Yeah, and he would get these really funky split pieces of the logs, and very short pieces, and then he would bring them to me. I don't do it anymore for him because it's a big mess, but resaw them about a 1 1/4 inch thick. Okay. So it's cool looking. They were a little too wet. They needed to be dried, but he would dry them out a while, and then he would do a little bit of woodworking on them, and then he would take old doorknobs. He'd buy them real cheap, at shows and stuff, and at PACA and places like that, from old houses and stuff, and then he would bolt them on, and that would be a coat rack.
Oh wow, that's pretty neat.
Stain it, And it'd be kind of like this piece. So this is kind of like
I like that. Yeah,
one of those pieces. And if you look at that, right, you can see
looks like ash.
And honestly, I don't really know what it is. I forgot what he said it was. This is a piece I kept, or he gave me, or somewhere I got somewhere. And so you can see, you could put a, like a knob here, a coat rack or something like that. You hang it up on the wall. And I wasn't really pleased with the way the shellac turned out, because it's a little more golden than I wanted.
It's pretty gold.
Pretty gold. And you can always, tone it down. But I was doing some stuff. My son likes to do this kind of work. And so the other thing that is kind of hot out there is this epoxy, mass casting epoxy. And we've done some of that. And it's kind of fun to do that. It really is a good experiment. There's some really funny YouTube videos of guys out there that pour gigantic tables, and then they walk away and they don't realize it leaked. Yes. And it goes all over the floor. It's like, oh boy. And we have poured 5-gallon buckets of resin here in the past. Man, you got to watch that stuff.
Yes,
you got a clay dike or something. You got to be so careful. They're going to end up on the floor.
And my experience with it, there's a bit of a heat transfer.
There is
when it's curing.
Kicks.
Oh
when it
boy!
Sets. Oh yeah, it really does. Some of it's supernatural. I did a resin years ago that was 4-step. It had 4 different chemicals in it. It was the A, the B. There was another component and a quick set, like a kicker, okay? Yeah. And it was liquid. It was like water almost. And so you mixed the C with A and B, and you blended those and you kept them separate. And then you didn't put this kicker in till the end. And you blended them all together, and then you put the kicker and blended it. And when that baby went off, it expanded and would knock your wood molds out.
Wow.
And then it would set and cook at about 225 degrees. Now that's like supernatural heat coming off.
Oh, you got to keep an eye on that.
Oh, that's really crazy. I put blankets on it because you want that exotherm to stay put, right? You don't want it to get super cool here and super hot in the middle.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and it would take 24 hours, and then believe it or not, it would expand, and then it would shrink back.
That'd be torture.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. Wow.
And then you have to pop your mold out, or pop, your pattern out of it. I did one mold with that, and it had a lot of aluminum filler in it. And that's the reason I wanted to try it, is because aluminum dissipates heat. It absorbs heat nicely. It conducts heat and dissipates heat. And so for the vacuum form tooling, that was perfect, right? Oh. It was a very expensive kit. I finally found a job to use it on. I thought, a little bit too why, And I have, for 35 years, I have followed and chased and watched and tested many different materials and found some of them pretty doggone cool. The way they work, they're pretty doggone cool. So,
the epoxy, like you said, it's become like a very popular. It's so popular. For me, I'm like an anti-hipster. Yeah. If somebody is just beating the devil out of something, I don't want to be anywhere near it.
Right.
Kind of let it run its course, but I'm leaning more towards it because it seems like I'd hate to miss out on something that I could produce sales on. Yeah,
and it's fun. It is. Yeah. However, a friend of mine that I have, he does what I was telling you, doing like similar to what you're doing, not so much producing multiples of things, but doing one-offs.
I like that. I really like that.
I like the one-off stuff. I really think that's the direction what I would go if I ever started just kind of my own little part-time woodworking business where I would go to shows, because you got to go to the people instead of the people coming to you. But he's known for always taking the coolest stuff to the shows, but he doesn't charge enough for his work, but he doesn't need to. Okay. He's on a pension. He doesn't need the money. He's doing it because he enjoys it.
It's kind of like a profitable hobby.
It is. It absolutely is. It pays for new tooling, it pays for some fun stuff. But and so he had this piece of work. He's not finished yet. It's in his shop. And it was all covered in dust when I was over there, and it was a resin cast. He had done resin cast in a log. Okay.
Oh wow!
And I seen it. I said, "Dude," my son's got to see this. So next time my son come down, I said, "KJ, we got to go over there. You have to see what Dan has done." And it's this log that is open. It's naturally sort of rotten and open on one side, and he has cast it full of a liquid resin. Some of it's tinted. Okay. He's got a fish down inside that's swimming.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so it looks like it's in a creek. It's a log that has a creek in it.
That's so cool.
And he took the resin and touched it as it was curing.
No.
Makes it look like water ripples, right?
No.
And he's grinding and polishing it, and then he's going to put it on a base, and this will be a piece in your house, in your living room that you look at.
That's a piece of art.
It's a piece of art. It's a table, but it's a piece of art.
I love that.
And that's the kind of stuff I find fascinating.
Same.
I really do. Because that could be purchased by a restaurant. It could be purchased by a museum. It could be purchased by some big space that just needs to fill it up with pieces that are kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then put a couple soft chairs by it. You come in, you set your coffee on it, and you go, dude, did you look at this? This is cool.
There's a fish in there.
There's a fish in there.
I love that. Yeah. Those one-off pieces, I find when I make them my own, I like them a lot more. I have one at home that I can't get rid of.
Yeah.
It's a concealment shelf.
Yeah, right.
That can fit a long rifle in.
Yeah, right.
I've got it for just my hat collection.
Sure.
It's just gorgeous, and it's made out of an old bed, an old water bed. I milled it down.
That's cool.
Because I didn't have the money for the
I like to
material.
repurpose. I like to see stuff repurposed. I don't understand why we're not repurposing more things.
I completely agree. I've got quite a bit of my products that are repurposed. A lot of the wood's repurposed.
Yeah. There's a log right there by you. That's an arborvitae log. Yes. And that was were a bunch of arborvitaes. In 1972, when my mom and dad bought the house where I finished growing up in St. Joe, there was a whole line of arborvitaes. We never knew if they belonged to us or the neighbor. We didn't know, but they were kind of fun to play amongst. Well, then when they got so giant and they were kind of falling down, the folks said, "Hey, will you take those down?" Sure. Neighbors didn't care. So, and this predated, I think, you working with me, and I took some of the guys over there and we cut them down, and they were wet. And so we stripped the bark off of them immediately. Ooh. And the ones that I didn't put in an area where air could, that was one where the air could get to, and it got hot and it dried out, and it didn't get splotchy like with the mold of the water. Yeah. The others, unfortunately, they were left in a storage shed that we had out here. And unfortunately, they got kind of splotchy on the outside, but it's okay because I still would take some of these and split them. Even though they're not gigantic, I would split them on the bandsaw and turn them into lumber. And I've built some pieces of furniture and things for my sister. So that's nice to know that this was in the yard of my house when I was a child. And one of the coolest stories that I like to tell goes back to about 1982, which is not that long ago. But I had a friend of mine that I worked at the IGA store with and knew in St. Joseph, and knew his parents. They were farmers, and they have a farmstead that's north of St. Joseph. And she said to me, she goes, "Hey, I know you're doing woodworking." She goes, "I'd like to pay you to take a piece of wood that's off of the barn, and I'm not going to give you much." She said, "This barn was built 100 years ago out of the trees that were on the farm."
Whoa.
So put that in perspective. So this was 1982, I think. So in 1882, the barn was built, okay? And it was built with trees that were big enough to yield 12-inch wide lumber. So that means they were probably 150-year-old oak trees. They've been there a while. Right? This was oak. So, right, that's right. Wow. So let's say they were 150-year-old trees in 1882.
Yes.
Okay. So she gave me a 4-foot-long piece of wood. It was beautifully flat. It was 1 inch thick and typical rough on one side, right? And I milled it, and I made, I think, 4 big picture frames for art that she wanted for her 2 adult children as gifts.
That's awesome.
And so I said, "Hey," I said, I've got enough left to make a small frame, something about this big." And she said, "Got just the project for it." "Really?" "Yep. Go ahead and make it this size." All right. So I made it a little bit smaller framework, made the frame, and gave it to her. And she said, "Would you like to know what's going in that?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "The signed deed for this farm, signed by Abraham Lincoln."
Oh, wow.
Well, he was an attorney.
Wow, that's
incredible.
And I said,
"You got to be kidding me." So think about this. He signed the deed when this land was sold and the farmstead was started, when the trees were still standing on the property, the trees that became the barn.
Oh, wow.
That's cool.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
See, those are the stories that this podcast, I want on this podcast. Yeah. You don't hear that from the Hollywood people that are buying like stuff from Italy and things like that. That's absolutely amazing.
That's Americana.
Yeah,
it's Americana.
Holy cow! No, I absolutely love that. And barn, that's something that a lot of people reach out to me for, is taking a piece of barn wood from an old homestead and making something memorable out of it.
Absolutely. That needs to be done. And one of the things that makes me sad is, having worked with a company that built only solid wood furniture back in the 80s, I will see pieces that I think might have come from that store that are just set by the curb.
Yes.
And I'm going, man, you know, if you don't do anything else, knock the if you're going to junk it, knock the furniture apart, keep the real wood, keep the solid wood, and let a woodworker mill that into something else. Hardwood is very expensive today.
Yeah, and you probably know this as well as anybody, especially with your past in woodworking. Today's wood is not the same.
It's not.
It's younger.
Yeah.
It's not as strong.
It's forced.
Exactly.
It's forced.
Exactly.
It's not the old growth.
It's lighter. It doesn't last as long. It rots faster. It's it's not as good as the old stuff. Right. So I completely agree of taking the old stuff and refurbishing it. Oh, yeah. Like the waterbed I had, it was from the 70s or 80s or whatever. Oh, yeah. Whenever waterbeds became really popular. Yeah. It's made out of
was it yellow pine maybe?
No, it was oh gosh. My brain's blanking right now. Yeah. It was made out of a softer wood.
Oh yeah. But it might have been a knotty pine.
I believe that's right. It was either
furniture grade.
It was either that or a fir.
Oh yeah,
it might have actually, because it smelled like a fir when it was coming off the saw. So it was either that pine or a fir. Yeah. But somebody would have just junked that or thrown it away. And it was, the material was pretty thick, and I had to bring it down really far. Yeah. That grizzly planer, it got put through its paces immediately. Yeah. But it was fun, and that's something that's going to be hanging in my house. I can't sell it. Right. Like somebody offered me over $1,000 for it, maybe. Right. But it's got so much history in it. Sure. It's unbelievable, and the wood's solid. Yeah. It's going to last. I like to build heirloom pieces, something that's you could pass down for generations. Right. Not something you buy from Home Depot or Lowe's, like these planer boxes. Yeah. I went to price those out at Home Depot and Lowe's, and I honestly was getting angry that they're charging people for the garbage that they have on their shelves. I know. And then the people will turn around and argue with those prices. And then you have to give them the story. Okay, well, you don't like the prices? Well, you could always learn how to woodwork and then buy all the machinery, and then you can sit across the table.
Trade your hourly rate for that.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's what people don't realize. I've ridden motorcycles. I'm not riding now. I gave up and went to a Mazda Miata. Oh, there you go. But I've had 57 motorcycles in 17 years. And the reason I say that is I wanted to touch on every brand. Yes. And I've ridden many of the same or different models of different brands. Harley, BMW, Kawasaki, Suzuki. I've owned them all except Royal Enfield. Like their bikes, may eventually have one, but the reason I say all this is that you have to recognize when you look at quality and when you look at different things and how they're made, and understand that when you take that motorcycle in for service, they're charging you $110 to $150 an hour to get to work on it, right? And they have machinery there, and some of the computer controlled machinery and the software and the licensing they have to pay to work on your car, they have to update that software, and it's very expensive. It really is. That's why you don't have a lot of small hometown mechanics anymore, because they can't afford to keep it up.
Not today. Today's modern, it's insane.
It's tough. So let's assume they're charging you $150 for the man and the machine. Okay, so the mechanic and the machine that he or she uses to do they plug in, they check out your machine, they run it, your engine, your truck, your vehicle, your car. So there's both equipment they've invested in, and then there's labor rates.
Yes.
So let's just assume it's a $40 an hour to $60 an hour labor rate that somebody's paying that mechanic. Well, if it takes you an hour and a half to build your planter, that's $90, and you haven't even paid for the materials, right? And so why should a person that came out of Parkland College at 21 or 22 years of age or whatever, that got a 2-year degree in auto mechanics, 3-year degree, and they're skilled, they're just wet behind the ears, but they're going out. Usually they're already wrenching. Usually they're already like that stuff, and they're doing it. but they're getting ready to go into a job that's paying them $25 to maybe $40 an hour, right? Well, how are they any different than the individual that's working in their shop and making a homemade product that's of decent quality and construction? They should be making that same amount.
I agree.
And when I had my first company, which was woodworking, as I mentioned, I was only able to charge like, $15 an hour back in the early 80s for everything. And people would say, well, you should only be charging $8 an hour. I said,
why?
I have all this money invested in equipment, and then I built my first shop. And when you have a $30,000 or $40,000 back then, $30,000 or $40,000 shop, $20,000 or $30,000 in equipment, and you're telling me I should only be getting, $8 an hour? It's like, that doesn't make any sense. I can't justify the overhead. So I read an article in Fine Woodworking. Fine Woodworking was probably still is a very good magazine, and all of us that were in the woodworking business, it was what we read. It's right?
Like the Bible almost.
It was amazing. Oh, absolutely. It was the best of the best. Sam Malouf and all these guys that were making rockers and furniture that you only dreamed to make or get the contract to make, museum quality stuff. And you were looking at what they were doing, and it's just like fine boat building on that same order. And I read an article, and there was a guy who was probably in his mid-30s, and he had a fine woodworking business similar to what I was doing. And I forgot where he was at, but he was probably more in a metropolitan area, bigger city. And he said, when he wrote the article, that's when I decided then I'm done. I'm not going to continue to try to do this, at least not here. And he told all of his friends he went to college with. He had a degree. And he went to college, and after college, he told all of his friends, he said, look, you guys are doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs, and you're in your early 30s and you're broke. In other words, you just come through college, you just barely got started in medical, barely got started as a lawyer or whatever they were doing, but they were professionals. And he considered himself a professional. He had a 4-year degree in art and design from a major university. He was very good. He was equally as good in his skill and his talent as they were. And they were broke. In other words, they were young, married, no kids, living in an apartment, trying to be a doctor, trying to play attorney, or whatever they were doing. But he said, we're all at the same level of broke. In other words, you can't afford a $5,000 dining room table, but that's what I have to charge for it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm talking about 1987.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the reality hit, and it hit across the United States. All of the guys like me that were trying to run small woodworking companies all realized the same thing. This is why it's so hard. And I tried to sell to the people that had more money and more appreciation for art and stuff. But the problem was these people traveled internationally. And one time I was asked to come in and look at a piece of furniture and ask, can you duplicate that? Well, I can probably duplicate that because they wanted a matching piece. Well, where did you buy this at? From Italy. We were there. We had it shipped over. And it's like, how can you compete, right?
You can't.
And a lot of the guys locally were coming out of the University of Illinois, and they were in art and design, and it was in some department over there where they had wood shops, and they were being taught by some of the best. I mean, they were really, really skilled teachers. And there was a very large company in Champaign called Centerline. It was owned by a man who taught at the U of I, and many of his students that went through the U of I came to work for him. In fact, he tried to hire me in the early 80s. And he was doing a lot of work in Chicago, a lot of work in St. Louis. That's where we had to go back then. That's where you had to go to sell really big things. One of my friends got the contract to do all of the bookcase work for a private library. And I'm talking about the early 80s. At that time, it was $250,000, but back then it was like $750,000 today. It was $250,000 addition just to build a private library on this man's house. And he got all of the woodwork for that, building all these gigantic, bookcases. Wow. It was a dream. It would have been something that would have been a dream for me to do. And so what I'm saying is, some of it is your market, where you're at. But we had a guy that I ended up buying out part of his shop, and I took over some of his projects, and he left here. His parents were U of I professors. He was a graduate of the U of I and had worked locally and started his own company. He was good. He was really good. Very gifted. And he had an old beat up Chevy pickup truck. And I said, where are you going? And you're leaving the area. Where are you going? He said, I'm going to put all this stuff, meaning the pieces that he had built for show and tell.
Yeah.
I'm going to put them in the back of my truck, throw a tarp over it. I'm going to New York City. And I'm going to go shop to shop to shop.
Oh, wow.
To show them what I'm capable of to get a job.
Holy cow.
Really? He goes, that's where you got to go, Ken. He goes, you can't stay here. Okay. Well, I stayed here and then found that my niche was really more, because I like plastic. I think plastic is cool. And I decided, well, okay, I'm not going to keep, because I was doing some big carpentry type stuff, cabinet work, beautiful work, very large, that had to be, delivered on big trucks and hoisted up, and 2 or 3 men would have to come in. We'd have to do the assembly and all that.
Cow.
And then I got into commercial displays, and again, big stuff. We had to have a lot of people.
Yeah.
But again, trying to duplicate yourself is tough. So I recommend in business, that you pick something, going back to the 3D printing or something like that, pick something where you can replicate yourself easily in the company, okay? Where you could have, let's say you had 10 3D printers and you were doing the design work. And so what you end up doing is you end up having people that could come over at night and help you for a couple hours, pull the pieces off, get the filament started, start machines running through the night because they're going to run unassisted, and clean them up, deburr them, and maybe assemble them and get your final product produced. And they're only there part-time. They only work in the evening. They don't want benefits. They've already got a full-time job, but they're your worker bees, okay? Start a business where you can have worker bees making these things with you, or when you're not around.
A way to delegate that to somebody else.
Correct. And, and it's kind of stuff that's kind of a no-brainer work. It's easy to explain to people how to do it. A few drops of super glue, you put it together, whatever. And then you do the brainiac type stuff. Maybe you do the design work, or you draw something down from Thingiverse or one of the maker communities, global maker communities. You edit it, you change it, you set it up, redesign from scratch, which is best. And then you work on, let's say, your advertising and marketing side of things, right? And then let your worker bees come in and do your work. That's what's best, in my opinion, because then you don't have to have the huge load of the employee bank, a lot of size, and which can be tough. The other thing that I would encourage people to look at doing is, as you replicate yourself, you actually teach people how to use those machines in their own home. You let them take them to their home. You let them use their own electricity. You pay them, a piecemeal rate. And I've done that in the past. There were some friends of ours, you knew them, and they lived in Homer, and they actually worked for me part and full time. And this potty house that we manufactured, at least 320 of them of a given color. We had it down to a science how to produce them. So we would mold the parts. They would take them to their home. They set up in their garage, and they reproduced. They trimmed and produced.
I remember that.
Remember that? Yeah, they literally could go out in their garage in their nightgown, or in their pajamas, and work when they wanted to. They got paid a flat fee.
That's awesome.
Per unit, and they would bring them back bagged and boxed. Oh wow! Ready to ship out the door.
I tell you, I still have one of those to this day. It sits at my desk. It's probably in a ballpark of 1,500 to 1,700 different videos.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's a product I absolutely love. I find it fascinating.
It's a cool story. Yeah, it really is, because it started out as a marketing. It's a marketing thing,
right? Yeah,
and they wanted that company who sells potty houses. They were going to start an LLC to loan the money, basically, so that let's say you're in the pumper business, and you wanted to be able to get into it, but you didn't have the money to buy $10,000 worth of potty houses and become a rental, right? Well, you already got the sucker trucks. You can always suck. You're already sucking sewage. Well, it's no big deal for the guys that are doing waste treatment or doing the work on, your local at your home. Your own particular sewage thing. Or a multiflow or something. Well, they've already got the trucks. They already got the equipment. Right. Why can't we just
That's
lease
genius.
these? It's genius.
That's genius.
They created a finance arm so that if people needed it, they could buy 10, 50, or 100 of these.
That's awesome.
And then you start being a rental company, right?
I like that.
And so they wanted these to be a bank because it touched on the economic side of things.
Okay.
A potty house. And I made it as a 1/10 scale, and I vacuum form it, which is the same process they use up in Whiting, Indiana, where they make these things. So the first order was for like 3,000 of
Holy
these things.
cow.
And I took them up there, and they called, the people in the sales office called the engineer down, and he goes, hey, he come down, introduced himself, and he was actually originally a drummer that came out of a Beatles lookalike band from England.
Holy cow.
And he said, hey, let me turn you through the plant. And he showed me how they were making the potty houses, and they actually built some of their own vacuum forming machines.
Wow.
And we toured the entire plant. It was a lot of fun. Then he took us to lunch. We had a great day that day, and I learned a lot about it. But it's so when you say, what am I going to make? Well, I like to make things that are icon products. So that's an icon, right? It represents, it's an icon of that. It's like having your sign out in front of your house or in front of your business. So, the term hanging your shingle came from a wood shingle, and you would paint on there, Smith Barber, and you'd hang it up. That's where it came from. It was a wood shingle.
Wow.
And that's hang your shingle, hang your sign. That's what it is. So, many of the icons that we've made, years ago, Garcia's asked me to make their green tomato stems for their top of their trucks and the top of their umbrellas. That's an icon product. It's an icon. It's a larger than life item. The big crows that we made were to promote, they were having problems with crows, and they had the Crow Fest in downtown Danville. So to help fund this, they got businesses to buy these crows, which are mounted to concrete blocks. And then you would buy it, and you would paint it up and design it as your business. Okay,
that's super cool.
And then they would put them out on the street, and then people would dress up like scarecrows, and they would have parades. It was the Crow Fest.
That's cool.
So they took what was a problem in a city, and they turned it into a festival.
I like it.
And in Chicago, you had the bulls. Why do you have a Chicago? Why did they have the bulls? It's because of the cows. It's because of Mrs. O'Leary's cow that kicked over the lantern that started the fire in the Chicago fire.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so some cities you'll drive into, and they'll have giraffes, or they'll have a small bear or something.
Or lions. Or
that's
ducks.
their thing. That's their thing. That's their icon. And so what they do, and we did the giant 36-inch diameter golf balls and the tee for a friend of mine who actually had the contract to make them. And that was for raising money for Ronald McDonald House. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And
I
so,
didn't know that.
Yeah. So what a company will do is to raise money, they will have something like that built, and then they'll sell it for, let's say, $10,000. It cost them $2,000 to build. They make $8,000. The people that buy it, then they paint something, they paint it up, and it becomes an icon for their particular business.
I like that.
And then you use those in the promotion. So people see them, they go, hey, that's cool. That is a really cool thing. I don't know why it's there, but it's so stinking cool because it's bigger, it's larger than life. And then you find out it was used to raise money for some not-for-profit, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think you could actually start a business, honestly, going around selling the concept of making the larger than life item. Like, for example, what if the city of St. Louis and all the businesses were to have you make a 3 or 4 foot tall, the St. Louis Arch, a miniature version of it, right? I'm just using that as an example.
Right.
Go to every city, go to every village. Okay. Humane societies have marketed little fire hydrants, right?
Yes.
Why? Because typical, the dog, taking a leak on the fire hydrant. So you got to be creative with it, right? But look for some way to do it. When you go through towns, and especially the older towns, and you still see an ice cream shop, and it has a giant ice cream cone, it's just an icon. It's an icon of that business. When you see it, it makes you think, I'm going to get an ice cream cone today, right? So that's both a marketing thing, and I think it's fun. And then, promote that to the business, promote it to the not-for-profit companies and organizations that are trying to raise money. We've done a number of those things through the years. And then signage. Signage is always something that you can do.
Signage is a big one. That's something I've had commissioned a lot over the last couple of years. I find it's fun, especially if you enjoy like a tabletop jig or a bandsaw. I thoroughly enjoy running a bandsaw.
Yeah.
So those projects are really fun for me.
They are.
Especially like the 3D, like Christmas knickknacks and stuff. Folks love those.
They do.
But some of them are a bit time consuming and they don't sell for quite the profit you'd wish.
Right. And that's one of the things I think every business person that's going to do something with their hands has to look for. How can I take something that's going to have the highest yield, the premium, for the least amount of time invested,
yes,
and be a true quality product. You know, you want quality. You want your name on quality.
I don't like sending a lot of stuff out of that wood shop that I personally, if I pick something up, I immediately, I could feel the quality. I could see the quality. And being in manufacturing, I know what it took to get that product out the door.
That's right.
And you can see all the flaws and things like that.
Sure.
I think I'm at an advantage when I'm producing my own stuff that I've had that training and that background. That's right. And sometimes the customer doesn't see it, but that's okay.
No, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah, I started out here, been about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I had a bunch of pallet wood that was just really attractive. And so I would scavenge it and hang on to it. Didn't have any nails in it. It was actually like divider pieces amongst our pallets that had plastic, for big plastic shipments. So I hung on to it. It dried out naturally. And I thought, one day I'm going to go out there and just on the bandsaw, I'm going to start cutting. And I'm going to see what this board speaks to me. And I'm going to make some things and for my kids. And one of the things I made was a little bit taller and it had kind of some handles and it was designed to, I just designed, they could turn it into a planter, but they ended up putting their mail in it. And their mail would come in right on the countertop. I put some felt on the bottom or something soft on the bottom so it wouldn't scratch. And it's all 3/4 inch pallet lumber. And then because I have a lot of plastic here, I took some ABS texture pieces and I sheared them and I put them in exactly on the inside of it. And then instead of gluing it together, trying to fold it up, I just put 5 pieces in there and I took and ran clear silicone. So if they did put dirt and water, it wouldn't leak.
Rinse it right out.
Exactly.
I like that.
And so I made one for my daughter for her cactus and one for, she put cactus in it, and one for the other, for my son and daughter-in-law. And then they ended up saying, I said, what'd you do with it? They said, we put our mail in it. It's perfect. Yeah. So making fun things like that for family is always neat.
Oh yeah, those small picnic tables I made. What folks use those for were phenomenal.
I know.
My favorite thing was squirrels. Yeah, when they get to sitting on the table and eating, it's just the photographs that you take from that is worth every minute I spent building those tables. It's on the end. I gave Ken Beatty a few. I've given out more than I've ever sold. Tables. Yeah. And I've determined that I probably won't be making those again for a while just because of the lack of popularity.
I understand.
But it was really fun. And that was a process like I've learned. I took what I learned from here manufacturing wise, much like our feller Henry Ford. I created an assembly line. I made it to where anybody could put it together. I labeled all the jigs so you could take a pile of wood and move it through the jigs and it comes a picnic table at the end. Anybody could do it.
That's right.
I was hoping to have my kids do it, but they're too wrapped up in sports.
I get it.
That,
I understand that.
But it's been a blast.
I'll tell you what would be fun. How old are your children right now?
Oh, I've got 10. Well, okay, we're getting ready to change. So 11, 16, and 17.
Okay. So even the 11-year-old, but the 16 and 17, let's say they've got a club they're a part of or even a sports related, and you say to them, hey, you guys need to raise some funds.
Yes.
Let's make some stuff in the shop and put it out there with a suggested retail price with 100% of it going to the club.
That'd be great.
And you take either donated materials like from us, plastic that's brand new, or you take repurposed material or pallet material, which is a lot of fun to work with.
Yes.
And you just set them out there and we have air nail guns and you just sit there and you teach them safety in the shop.
Yep.
You teach them the assembly line process. And the night before, the day before, whatever, a week or two out, you prep the pieces they can't on the saws and stuff. Let's say, your 16 and 17-year-old can, but you prep them and you have a whole stack of stuff. And like you said, you got your instructions. They go, okay, guys, we're going to make 50 of these. We're going to make birdhouses. We're going to make this. We're going to make that. Why are we doing this? This is stupid. No, it's not stupid because we're going to make it available for your class at school that's trying to raise some money for new equipment or new computers or again, jerseys or something you need for your club.
Schools will always need help with funding.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
I like that.
We did that here in town, for example, for the Rails to Trails. So we wanted to put some things out there that would be kind of fun. One of the things we thought, okay, well, somebody suggested this. How about birdhouses? And you have the St. Joseph Ogden High School shop class make some of those. And I believe that's who they worked with.
That's
to have,
pretty neat.
Yeah. So then, you have all these different little birdhouses made to be birdhouses because you have to make them to the right size and all that stuff. And then you mount them to some posts out there. Well, that dovetails the communities together, right? It dovetails the schools in with what the community is doing. And the young people that worked on it can go walk down that trail and say, I made that.
Oh, yes.
Made that. That's fun.
Yes, that's something that Heritage did a while back. And still to this day, there's still some pieces hanging around here and there. And I'll tell the kids, hey, I was a part of that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have done, especially with the advent of like Etsy and Shopify.
Yeah.
I've actually made more money off of things like that by selling the blueprint.
Yes.
Online, like that picnic table, for instance.
Right.
People that can't afford or don't want to ship it.
Right.
They can, or they want to have their hands on a new project or learn something new. They could take that and.
Sure.
Of course, you don't have all the wood, but you have the blueprint. You pay us I think it's charging 98 cents for the blueprint.
Yeah. Right.
And you can make as many as you want.
That's exactly right. I'll tell you, one of the things, and this steps into a whole nother discussion, but the whole crypto world and Bitcoin, one of the things I recommend to people that have a passive income, like what you just described, that you get set up to accept Bitcoin. And then you sell things that are cheaply sold, like a blueprint, like that.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
Or let's say it's an STL file.
Yeah.
That's used for 3D printers. You can sell the file. Right? You can have a download and they can download it off of your website or something like that, or you can email them the STL and it costs them $1. And it's $1 in Bitcoin. And the only thing you accept is Bitcoin, let's say, for example. So then you begin to generate an income, a pot of Bitcoin that just sits there that you could use eventually either as a storage of wealth or you could use it to buy things with. But you're selling something that you really don't care if it sells or not. It's not a big deal. In other words, your livelihood isn't coming from that.
There's no physical anything. It's
simple. And I've got a product that we developed for a friend of mine, and he had asked us he came in here and he said, I really think this model, it was what's supposed to be a stealth, very high-speed bomber that was designed under the Eisenhower administration.
Oh, wow.
And he wanted it at a 1/48 scale, and we built it. We built 2 of them. We 3D printed all the parts. He put them together and painted them, and I've recently sold them on eBay.
Wow.
And what I'm going to do is I have all the STL files. So instead of 3D printing them myself, I'm going to sell modelers around the world the STL files, right?
Genius, absolutely genius.
Yeah. So you buy the STL files, and you can print this yourself and pedal it yourself.
I like
for
that.
for your own purposes.
And honestly, since I've left ShapeMaster, I've been here recently. But the pandemic's really fired me up about passive income.
Yes.
Rich Dad Poor Dad was a book that you suggested to me. That's a book that I've suggested to a lot of people. Passive income is my passion. I have 7 different avenues of income passively, aside from my 9 to 5.
Right.
And I feel more passionate about my passive income than I do clocking in for anybody else.
Absolutely.
And that's something that my kids, they live it. They don't think it. They don't even think about it. They're always coming up with something new products, new ideas, ways to help the community, things like that.
Absolutely.
And honestly, that wouldn't have been inspired had I'd stuck to a corporation. If I'd stuck to driving a semi or things like that, that inspiration would have come from nowhere. That they would have been their aspirations would be like, oh, I want to be a truck driver, or I want to do whatever that is. Now they're like, hey, I see that you don't have to clock in. You could make money.
It's called entrepreneurship.
Yes, exactly.
And back in the 1800s, there was a lot of entrepreneurial type work being done. Honestly, the farmer who has been really almost done away with. And I think we need to get back to that. I think people need to be looking at 5-acre plots.
I agree.
And building their own homes, small, keep it simple. but learn how to live on 2 or 3 acres.
Build a homestead. Maybe if you have some excess honey coming from your bees, that could be another passive way of income.
That's actually something I'm looking at doing later.
Fantastic.
I want to get into beekeeping. I have a friend of mine that's a beekeeper, and there's some local people around here that sell supplies for that.
Yes.
And I think that's, first of all, obviously we know bees are very, very important.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And so there's that. And then it's the hobby and the enjoyment. And then it's the benefit of the eating the honey and using the honey. And then it's the benefit of moving it on out and being a business.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And it's the mindset. It's probably part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you today is that mindset. Now, this sounds terrible, but I believe it's 85% of the the U.S. population or 15% of the U.S. population has an IQ of 85 or under. And that's not good. I don't like that number. I think we need to bump those numbers up. Public school is one of them. But the problem that I see in the world, and it's really advantageous to folks like us, is that I shouldn't say nobody, a majority of the people will not think outside the box that way. They're just going to go to the store and buy honey with the money they accrued from their 9-to-5 job clocking in. Right. They don't think outside the box. They're very comfortable, which is fine. It's fine. I have no problem with that. I've been there. Yeah. But I can't live inside that box anymore. Right. It hurts me. I don't know about you, but it's painful to live inside. I have to live outside the box now.
I've always lived outside the box all my life because I was basically, we weren't dirt poor, but we didn't have money for stuff.
Right.
You know, my mom, when I was born, she quit working. She worked 7 years full time when I came along, and my dad provided a stay-at-home mom, and that was a great blessing to me, okay, and to my sister. But it also meant that we didn't have that second income. Yes. Now, my dad, you may not know this, my dad played professional music.
I remember this.
Yeah. And so he worked as a printer, and he ran a print shop at the University of Illinois for 31 years.
Oh, wow.
So he printed at Champaign High School. It's where he learned offset printing. Then he printed for Collegiate Cap and Gown. Then he was drafted into the military during the Korean War, and he printed on a ship. He was a Navy man.
Wow.
And he printed for the 4 years he was in the Navy. And then with that many years of experience, he was obviously an accomplished printer. He then immediately came here. He interviewed a few places and went to work at the U of I. He was hired to be the foreman of his shop in a very fledgling shop in 1955, worked until 86. Now, when he came back from the Navy, he always played the guitar, and he played the guitar while he was in the Navy. And when he came back from the Navy, his brothers were listening to country music and, Hank Williams and all that stuff. And I asked my dad, I said, I'm not a fan of country music, never have been. And I said, I was more of a rocker, and I said, but why, Dad, why country? He goes, I was a dance band. I was playing in dance bands. And he said, I came back and everybody was listening to this twangy music, my brothers and all that. He had a family of 10.
Oh, my gosh.
And all of his brothers, some of his sisters played instruments. And they said that's all they were listening to. And he said, honestly, country music eventually grows on you.
It does.
And he said in the 50s, about 1957, 58, they were playing together as a small group. And my uncle basically was the founding leader of it. It was Ken and Ben Cooley.
Wow.
And it was Ben Cooley and the Arkansas Travelers. And so they started that band. And in 1959, they won the Champaign County Fair Award. And that got them a free trip to Nashville to play on the Grand Ole Opry and to record in Nashville, to record records. And so they actually were on, I think Joe Ryder was the guy, it was his radio broadcast and stuff. And I remember seeing pictures of it. They were on a bus, and the band set up at the back of the bus, and they had to play all the way there and back. That was part of their responsibility, was entertaining the people that went.
That's
and my mom
awesome.
went, and all the wives got to go, And so they went to Nashville. Of course, they did Ernest Tubbs Record Shop. They were there on Ernest Tubbs Record Shop. It was like a radio broadcast. They recorded at Star Day. They had a few of their own songs that they wanted to record. And one time I was out at my Uncle Ben's long before he passed away. And I said, we were listening to some of the songs. My dad had died, and I was listening to some of the songs. Ben, I said, tell me who played the piano on that, because you guys never had a piano player in your band. I said, who played the piano? He goes, Ken. He goes, we were in the recording studio, and it was a what do they call him? It was a studio musician.
Okay.
But he was really good.
Wow.
And he sat in on the best. and you pay them. You know, hey, can you set in on this song? We think it would be good to add a piano to this song.
Wow.
Sure. And they're just so good. Just set in. And this guy's playing like Floyd Kramer. And I still, when I listen to that song to the day, there's only one song ever recorded that had a piano on it. And I said to my Uncle Ben, I said, honest to goodness, you never had a piano player in any of your groups. He said, well, you can't afford them. You can't afford 6 or 8 pieces.
Wow.
You know, you have to split the money up, you know. And so anyway, they were asked to go on the USO tour, you know what that is, and they wanted to immediately go to Nova Scotia and play around the world entertaining the troops. They said, dude, we got full-time jobs, we got families, we can't do this. This was in the early 60s. And so every year the band would drive down to Nashville, they would record more songs, and they would hang out in Nashville and meet musicians, famous guys. My dad played guitar for Stonewall Jackson, backed him up on stage. He backed up Bo Cephas, Hank Williams Jr., and he backed up Ray Price, the famous Ray Price, and he also played on stage with many others. And so their band was at Springfield at the State Fair, and for 13 years in a row they had the link. Well, they started out in an ag building, a famous ag building. They had a stage, and they played there.
Wow.
And then the building burnt, and they built them a brand new stage called the Lincoln Stage, may still be there. And for 13 years in a row, we got in free to the State Fair because, you know, you're with the band, man.
Yeah.
Anytime you're with the band, you get in. And so as kids, all my cousins, we'd go in and we help them roadie. We were the roadies. We'd put the equipment up on stage. They'd be up there tuning up their guitars and the drums and the steel guitar and all that. My dad would say, okay, here's the deal. You guys are welcome. Here's some cash. Go play the games. Go ride the rides. Go have some fun. But I want you to be back here for the first show at 2 or whatever. There's a famous Nashville musician coming in, and he's coming in with his guitar. He or she. They're going to get up on stage and do their songs, and we're the backup band. We play for them. And we always knew how the gig worked. And they said, be here for the show because help pack out the show. That's cool. So myself, and I had my Uncle Ben's kids. I think he had 6 kids.
Ooh.
My sister and I. So all of us cousins, we'd be there, and of course our aunts and uncles and all the people that weren't up on stage were there. And so 13 years in a row. And then your dad's on the radio. I mean, they're piping this out of the State Fair, so you're listening to it. And you're expected to record it on a cassette for your dad, And so it was fun. Of course, we were all young. We were not allowed to go into bars, okay? So we couldn't rodeo for be roadies for the bars. But every Friday and Saturday night, my dad played professionally at clubs in Champaign, Decatur, and around the area for 28 years. So he was playing guitar, making good money on the side. So that was his side gig.
That's amazing.
And my dad, to his credit, he never drank. And my dad, he would never go to the bars unless he was playing. And then quite frankly, we never went to fairs unless he was playing. And he did a lot of fair dates. But they're inducted, my Uncle Ben Cooley and my dad, Ken Cooley, are inducted into the Illinois Country Music Hall of Fame.
That's awesome.
And what they said of them, I remember when they got their award, they said to the younger country music artists, they said, you would not be here today and have a stage to play on if it wasn't for men and women like the Cooleys that plowed the ground and kept country music alive. And that's really true. And so we talk about business. When you go someplace and you support live music, local live music, you're supporting artists, starting artists that are trying their best to not just keep that genre alive, but keep the interest in live music alive. Yeah. There is no difference between live music and the maker community that's making things. There's no difference. It's artwork. Yes. It's creative genius.
Yes.
And my dad could read music, and he was taught to read music at an early age. And what was a funny story was, I remember, I'm not sure if my sister was married yet, but her boyfriend or maybe her husband, he had a pickup truck. And my dad said, hey, I went to a garage sale here in St. Joe and I found a stand-up piano. And I bought it for $175. It was old, heavy stand-up piano. He goes, I bought it and I want you to go get it and bring it over to the house. And we're like, oh, those things are so, off balance and heavy. And my brother-in-law goes, you got to be kidding me. I said, no. Can you go get it? Yeah, I'll go get it. He always did anything my dad asked. And so we went over, we got it, backed up to the front door of the house up there on the hill in St. Joe, rolled the piano in. And my brother-in-law is like, you don't know how to play piano. Says to my dad, And so we got the piano position where Dad wants to put it in the living room, much to my mother's chagrin, and put the bench there. My dad sits down, starts knocking out ragtime. He's a guitar player.
Wow.
And he looks at my brother-in-law and he goes, there's not an instrument I can't play.
That's awesome.
And my dad had a fiddle, and he would always play at that. He never perfected it, but he could play fiddle. He grew up playing music, and that was their entertainment. And they were, like I said, they were poor. They were dirt poor, and family of 10 coming through the Great Depression. Okay. And then when I was raised, I started to tell you earlier, we always had a junk drawer. And my philosophy is, if you have a junk drawer in your house, don't ever empty it or organize it, because then there will never be enough nuts, bolts, or screws in there. But if you leave it and you kind of shake it around, there's one more. How many do you need? 6 wood screws. There's one more. Push it around. There's one more. There's always enough. And I had to make things. We didn't have the money. And in the early 60s, in the mid and late 60s, you just didn't go to the toy store. There was no such thing as Toys R Us.
Right.
You didn't have all the plastic junk. And I'm in the plastics business, but I'm saying you didn't have this mass-produced stuff to just load kids up with toys. You had to be creative. You had to make things, very much like Lucy on Peanuts, her psychiatrist bench, right? That was a handmade thing, it's a cartoon.
That was one of my first inspirations, by the way.
Yeah, I get it.
I opened a bicycle repair shop when I was a kid.
Exactly.
Very similar.
Exactly. That's a funny story. I had a kid I went to high school with. He was very smart, and he loved bicycles. And he was the one that turned me on to really nice bicycles. I had a Sakai 2000 back in the day.
Wow.
He worked at a bicycle shop. He knew bicycles. And he was one that turned me on to the movie Breaking Away, which is about a kid that wanted to race bicycles and ride, but he was a cutter. His family were stone cutters in Indiana, Bedford, Indiana. Stories about Bedford, Indiana. I think it was filmed there. And so anyway, my friend worked up on campus at a bicycle repair shop, right? We graduated high school, 1979. I bought a Sakai 2000, and I was riding it. Loved my bike. And anyway, years later, I'm talking to a guy here in Ogden who worked with him up on campus. And he goes, oh, I knew him. I knew Bill. He goes, yeah. He goes, whenever he would sign his, the work he did for a customer repairing on the bicycle, he would always write on there BRM. That's where you're supposed to put your initials. He would put BRM. And he said, I always figured, well, his name's Bill, so he's used as Bill. And I thought, wait a minute. I think one time again, his last name starts with an S, not an M. What's BRM? And he smiled and he said, Monty Python, bicycle repairman.
No.
So all those years, he was writing BRM.
No.
That wasn't his initials. That was bicycle repairman.
Oh my gosh.
It's absolutely hilarious.
That is hilarious.
I loved it. I said, wow, that's something I learned about my old high school friend who I haven't seen since.
That is a wonderful Easter egg.
Isn't that fun?
I like that.
It's fun.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, that junk drawer, what you're talking about there, that's kind of how I think I've developed the skills that I have with woodworking, is because growing up, we didn't have money. I mean, my mom, I think the most she ever made, still to this day, she ever made per year was $14,000. Yeah. And that just wasn't cutting it in the early 2000s, late 90s. I made my own stuff. I needed a desk. I found the wood. I made it. Yep. And Grandpa's junk drawer provided me with the screws.
That's right. But you know what? It makes you resourceful. It does. There's a book, and I believe it's called Shopcraft as Soulcraft, and it's written by a man who is a college professor, philosophy, but he was raised by a single mother, and next to where they were raised was a foreign car shop, okay? And so he would knock around over there and talk to the guys, and he's 13, 14 years old. Hey, can I get a job here working? And he's thinking, learning how to work on a car, right? And they're thinking, sure. Come on over, kid. We'll give you a job. Well, what do they have him doing? Sweeping the floor, cleaning up oil, not fixing anything, but just working around the shop. And after a number of months, it's kind of like, Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid, where he's having to wax the guy's car, and he doesn't think he's learning anything. This kid got aggravated, and he said, look, you told me I could learn all this stuff. And they said, yeah, you will in good time, but you have to, sometimes you learn from osmosis. You just, you watch people and you learn. And he did. And so he learned how to work on the foreign car.
Wow.
Okay. Foreign to an American at the time. And keep in mind, this guy's, I don't know, he's probably 60 years old now. So this was a long time ago, right? But and his mother was a part of a religious cult or something, he said, as I remember the story. And if I've got it right, I think he was kind of homeschooled, so therefore he was right there all the time.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So he spent a lot of time over there, so he learned a lot when he was young. Then he went to college, but then he realized that learning to work with my hands it fed my soul. And he said, I believe that we've missed something. I believe that in our culture in America, we need to teach the trades to kids, 7th, 8th grade, all through high school, teach shop class, teach mechanics, teach the automotive mechanics, learn how to work on small engines, learn how to work on everything. Don't just concentrate on computers.
Exactly.
Because if nothing else, do this as a part-time business or as a hobby, right? Because when you're doing your boring job, which is college professor, he's got something, he has his own motorcycle repair shop, professional repair shop, and he's working on bikes. That gives him that Saturday, that evening to get his mind off of the things he does for a living, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've missed something
I
in this
agree.
world. I think we've missed it. I think we're going to have to get back to teaching that.
Yes.
I think if I was in the inner city, I would get businesses, that have the money and they've got it. I would get them to take a whole block of derelict houses, bulldoze it. I would remove the dirt and I would make sure it's nothing but pristine, growable dirt. And I would have every kid that lives within a geography where they can walk there after school, they sign up to join the club, and they're going to learn to grow their own food.
And I guarantee you, all it takes is a handful of those kids to show like they're really loving it, and all the other kids are just going to flock to it.
Absolutely. And then you have the kids that are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're working with their siblings. Their siblings are teaching them. It's just like working on a farm. And my dad grew up and where my grandfather was a carpenter building homes. So my dad learned that, but then my grandfather was always buying land and owned farms down in southern Illinois. And this was during the Depression. And so he was trying to get a vegetable farm, and he had a good vegetable farm going down there. He'd come up here, build some spec houses. Grandma was up here, and then he'd go back down there during the summers and grow. My dad, my uncles would go down there and work with him. There was 5 boys and 5 girls in the family, and out of 10, and they weren't, there was 3 boys in the younger batch, and 2 boys in the older batch of 5, and the older ones were significantly older that they almost basically helped to raise the younger ones. So the younger ones were going down there and learning, how to do farming with grandpa and stuff.
Wow.
And so that all came natural. And what we've lost, I know that the Amish and a lot of groups do it well still to this day. But when I was a kid growing up, and let's say somebody in the family needed a new roof, all of my uncles, my dad, my uncles, and the in-laws would show up. The women would come. They would make a meal. The men are up on the roof, tearing the roof off, putting the new paper on, putting the new roof on, and getting it done. And in a day's time, the family would come together and we put a roof on so-and-so's house. What are we doing next month? Pouring concrete.
Wow.
So then you're pouring a basement, you're pouring a footing, you're pouring a garage floor, you're pouring a driveway. This is how I grew up. And when my dad, at his house, he wanted to put in hot water heat. So he learned how to do it. He could sweat solder well. He had his cousin who had his own, down at Mattoon, Illinois, had Cooley. It was HVAC type, plumbing business.
That's cool.
He went down there and he said, hey, I'm going to buy the equipment from you. Can you give me some pointers? Yep. So my dad learned how to do it, and he put the entire Wheel McLean heating system into our house. He was a printer. He was a printer. But he did all that at our home, right? And I remember him learning how to bleed it and get all the air out of the system. Oh, yeah. My dad was a fanatic about doing stuff right. So then when his sister wanted to put hot water heat in her house, He knew how to do it.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I navigate my life. And then my kids see that and they love it.
Yeah.
Going back to, that type of work, feeding your soul.
Yeah.
My son is learning that.
Yep.
My daughter's not so much. My son, though, he had trouble sleeping. And I said, come join Dad for a day and do some choring.
Yeah.
And he's halfway through. He said, I really like this.
Sure.
And then the next day he asked for more. Yeah. And now every day he wants more because it's helping him sleep, but it's feeding his soul.
It is. It feeds your soul. It makes your hands are working.
Yes.
There's a
sense of accomplishments.
There is. It's like riding a motorcycle. The motor skills that are trained into you as a motorcyclist, it develops a part of your brain.
Yes.
And so my son, who worked here through these years coming up, we worked on projects together. I tried my best. I didn't do as much as I should have and wanted to with the woodworking and learning. He learned a much more broad here because he had to do a variety of things instead of just concentrating on the artsy stuff, which I wished I would have done more of the furniture building with him. But since he's been an adult, he's been coming back and we've been doing projects. So his in-laws, his wife's parents bought 15 acres in Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
And they're going to move there. But in the midst of it, the last year and a half, KJ and Nicole have been going down and they've been helping them work, like bush hogging, trimming, cleaning. And KJ loves landscaping stuff. Oh. But then they were down. I said, now, Bubba, watch out for snakes. There's a lot of snakes in Tennessee. So he was down there and they had an old, I'm not going to call it a barn. It was more of a shed that a tree had grown up through that they had to tear down. And so he went down and methodically took the metal off the roof, methodically took all the wood apart, denailed it, stacked it up and stuff, so that in case they ever want to repurpose it, they can, or dispose of it if they want to. But that's the kind of stuff, and he's building up his tools, okay?
Yes.
And so that's the kind of thing that I highly recommend people do.
Yes.
And so from the age of whenever, when you're old enough to swing a hammer, even at a young age, my son had a real working drill press in his bedroom in his age of 6.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so we built a really nice workbench, which we still have. We built a workbench for him. It was in his bedroom. He had his own drill press. He had his own tapping machine, so he could actually cut, and he had a saw that could cut your arm off. He had a hand saw, a very nice fret saw, hand saw. So I would bring home wood and plastic, and he's drilling and tapping and assembling and building. And so I remember we were up at at Lincoln Square Mall in Urbana, and my son was doing Lego trains with his cousin. Again, they were like 6, 7 years old. And they were winning the awards for the train layouts at the big train show. And this old guy came through there with his grandkid, and I go, my son's had a drill press in his bedroom, since he was 6, and he was real snotty. And he said, you shouldn't be making your kid sleep in the garage. And I'm thinking, no, my son's a top engineer, It's like, So anyway, here he is. Here he is learning. And you teach them safety. Yeah. And you trust them how to work with the tools. So when I say as long as you're ready to swing a hammer and work with some tools, get them on the real stuff. Get the play school crap out of the way. Get them some real stuff and let them learn. Teach them discipline of safety. And then as they start coming through, they'll test. They'll see what they can do. And they'll start making some fun stuff. And that makes you proud. But it also stretches their mind and their ability, right?
And it gives them confidence.
Sure it does.
I mean, that confidence that you can make something.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of relying on somebody to tell you can make something.
Well, when he went to the University of Illinois for mechanical engineering, none of the other students knew how to do anything. They didn't. And then in his capstone project, he contacted me early on. He goes, hey, Dad, our capstone project, which is the last semester of engineering, everybody gets a project to do. And it's team building. And so they had 5 people on a team. And he said, I'm kind of worried about this. He said, and he's been doing SolidWorks since he was 6. So he's very good at SolidWorks CAD programming, CAD design. So he said he would always, as a student, all those years, they would always give him the drafting because none of the kids were at the level he was at. College kids. So here he is. He said, Dad, I'm drawing this thing up. And he goes, this is going to be for the Orpheum Children's Museum. And he said, it's 10 foot tall, 4 foot wide, and about 3 foot deep. And he said, it's going to be an air-powered rocket launching thing we got to build.
Wow.
And he said, can I send you the CAD? I said, yeah. And I looked at it and I go, dude, that's like a lot of work. And he said, yeah. He said, how much do you think it's going to cost? I said, if ShapeMaster built it, it's $25,000. I said, how much did they give you? He said, $2,500.
Oh.
I said, you don't have enough money. He goes, I know. I think it was 25. Actually, 15. It was 1,500.
Wow.
1,500. They took in 5,000 as a donation, but they only gave the students 15, as I recall. So I said, $1,500. I said, dude, this is, I mean, you got $1,000 in materials.
Wow.
So I said, here's what we're going to do for you. He goes, I don't have a place to build it. He goes, the shop over here is so small, I don't know where we're going to build it. I said, well, you can build it out here at ShapeMaster. We can give you a place to store it and build it here. You know, you can do this here. Really? He said, I got my team members. So I said, yeah, I know one of your team members. He's from Muhammad. I said, I know your guys. He said, yeah, they can come out here and work. I'll teach them safety, and they can do it. So I said, I don't want anybody using the table saw but you. But you know, that's the rules. He goes, that's fine. So they came out here for that. But when I looked at the job, I said, here's what we're going to do for you. I said, we will donate some of our time to help you with it. I'll give you all the plastics. I'll donate that.
Oh, wow.
But I'll give you $2,000 towards materials. Okay. So now you got $3,500 and our labor, some of our labor, we'll volunteer some of our work, which we could do. And so anyway, this was like months of work they had to do. And so what was funny was, we have a security system here and cameras. And so the first night, or Friday night, he came out and he and I table sawed and prepped a lot of the pieces, got them prepped. So that Saturday morning when the kids showed up, when his schoolmates showed up, these are seniors in college and engineering, they could all start in on assembly.
Oh, wow.
And so when they showed up, we had donuts and coffee and juice ready for the kids. And I said, now I'm going to teach you some safety, and then I'm going to turn you loose with the cordless drills, electric drills, and countersinking bits. I'm going to show you how to measure. I'm going to show you how to square, show you how to line out these boards. And they were yellow pine. They were 10 inches wide. They were 10 foot long. And how to do all this prep work and begin to assemble. So you can start to put this whole thing together and get this whole thing erected and up. It's 10 foot tall,
Jeez.
4 foot wide. So we did that. I walked them through all of that. And then I turned them loose. I said, now KJ's the only one that can use a table saw. I'll work with you on the bandsaw and the chop saws, the compound miter saws.
Yeah.
But I got to work with you on safety. And I taught them safety on that and worked with them on all that. So that's how it all began. And so then the first Saturday went well. So I came back at the end of the day and I looked at these kids and they've assembled this thing and it's laying on the floor. It looks like a waterbed frame. Okay. It looks like a bookcase, waterbed. So I looked at them. I said, what have you just made today? What do you mean? What have you just built? What is this assembly? Well, we're going to stand it up. And I said, no. What else could this be? What have you just learned how to build today? We don't know. I said, if you stood this up, could that be a bookcase? Oh, yeah. Okay. If you put a couple pieces of plywood on it and a futon, what would it be? A platform bed. I've made many platform beds in my life. I said a platform bed or a water bed. Wow. So you see what you've just learned how to do? Go to the lumber yard, cut the wood, drill the holes, glue and screw it together. See what you can do at home now?
Yep.
Wow. These are all engineers.
Wow.
They've never learned this in their life. Never had
And
it.
here's KJ.
Oh, he knows it all.
Oh, man.
So anyway, we get done after like 2 months of production. What was really funny is that night, I'd get a call from somebody, hey, Ken, there's a yellow pickup truck, and it's a hot rod truck, sitting outside your warehouse, and the warehouse door's open. Lights are on. Yeah. Bunch of kids over there. Yeah, what are they doing? That's my son and his college mates. They're working on their capstone project. Really? Is it okay they're over there? I said, he's got keys to the building. Yeah, of course he's he's my son. And so we'd be spying on them through our cameras, and their girlfriends would come out and hang out with them, and they're studying. And some of them are crawled up in big boxes, with their books, and they're reading. The girls are reading. They're sleeping till 1 a.m. while these guys are working on this thing. And we bring pizzas and stuff.
That's awesome.
So anyway, these guys had a lot of fun. One kid was from Istanbul, Turkey.
Oh, wow.
One kid was Sri Lankan from New Orleans, and you'd appreciate this. He was a DJ. He was DJing, had a professional DJ business while at the U of I.
Wow.
He's a Sri Lankan born and raised family come here, born and raised in New Orleans. Another one was from Naperville. He was from India. His family's from India, but he's from Naperville. And wonderful kids, just loved them and had so much fun with them. And so the whole project gets done. It's beautiful. It works. We deliver it, help them deliver it. And I went up there on the day of the unveiling, and it was a big hit.
Oh, wow.
And Channel 3, I think, was there, and everybody was there. And so I tell you all that story to tell you that those 3 students that were from other countries or other areas, they said in all 4 years over here at college, we've learned more from your dad than we've learned in engineering at the university as far as how to actually build something. And I know that they don't have the time. I know that program is hard. It's tough. It's a lot of hours. I know it is because KJ went through it. But I'm going to tell you that I really wish that there would be at least a year or 2 of nothing but intense metalworking shop and woodworking shop and plastics so that they understood this. Because I have seen for 35 or 40 years, I've had students come to me and they want me to do something and go, that can't be made.
Yes.
Through conventional methods. And then the downside to 3D printing is they've learned how to design something in CAD space and then 3D print it, and it can't be made any other way.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
No.
Because you need to learn how to make it in the real world. How would a foundry make it? How would the machine shop cut it?
Right.
You know, and it's like they'll send me something with a sharp inside corner. Okay, how do you want me to make this? Well, I thought you'd mill it with a round cutter, make a square corner.
Not quite that easy.
And they don't understand that.
Yeah,
so those are some of the things that I talk about a lot when it comes to our education system.
Yeah.
And, right, we need to teach entrepreneurship.
I agree.
Need to teach you how to balance a checkbook, how to open up certain accounts, how to write a business plan, how to start a business. Those are really important. And everybody should get that training. I don't care if you're college bound or not.
Right.
Everybody should get that training.
I agree.
Coming out of high school, you should know how to start your own small business.
I agree.
Yeah.
That'll help a lot of, I mean, that won't just help those individuals out. That helps the entire nation out.
Absolutely.
When you have a nation of thinkers instead of a nation of doers.
Yeah. It used to be, it was an interesting thing back in the 70s, there was a commercial on TV and it would show this boy was a paper boy and he was delivering newspapers and it would say, this paper boy makes more money than 80% of the world's population, right? And it was true. But he was a businessman because he had to take the papers and receive them. He had to keep them dry. He had to wrap them up, put a rubber band on them, put them in a bag when it was wet. And then he had to figure out, how am I going to transfer? He's a transportation genius, right? He's got to figure out, how am I going to walk my route or run on my bicycle? And I'm going to deliver. I have to be a delivery man. I have to get the paper to the person the way they want it. Do they want it, you know, in the hoops underneath the mailbox? They want it right in front of their door. Where have they asked me? So then it teaches you the business relationship of interacting with the customer. Then once a week, you're required to go back and collect.
Right.
Right?
That one was a big one for me.
Right. And now you're handling money.
Yes.
But you're handling somebody else's money.
Right.
The newspaper's money. And you have to give them a receipt. So now it's door to door, face to face, right? I had a friend of mine I worked for back in the 80s, and he grew up in Washington, D.C. And he grew up around people that were in the government. And he was pretty young and naive. I think he was 10. And his buddy was going to be gone for two weeks on vacation. So he had to go learn his buddy's paper route. Oh, wow. Because his buddy had a paper route. And I think he was delivering newspapers to Chevy Chase Drive. And very famous road out there. And as I remember the story, I don't know if it was on Chevy Chase or where it was at, there was a house and a house next door. And one house was the Vice President of the United States. And the next house was a famous senator. And their wives would always talk across the fence. He said he could see their wives visiting. And he said, as I'm delivering the paper, you know, I'm throwing it up on the porch, you know, on my bike, and I'm pedaling and I'm throwing it, you know, to all these people, muckety mucks, you know. And he said, I always wondered, who are those guys in suits and rocking chairs with black glasses looking at the paper, you know? You know, he said, well, they were Secret Service or somebody like that. Gosh. You know, it's hilarious, you know. But here's this kid. He has no understanding that you're driving by the vice president's house or somebody like that. You know,
that would be wild.
Somebody that was in government, you know, that needed protection. But anyway, that was funny. That would have been, you know, like in the 60s. But anyway, But the paper boy, look at the paper boy. Look at the kid that mows yards or does yard work and stuff like that. And when we were kids, we had to detassel corn. That was about all you could do to make money.
That's always fun. Detasseling, derogging.
People have no clue. And their city kids had no clue how much work the farm kids were doing. And actually, we weren't even farm kids. We lived in St. Joe. We weren't farm kids. We were, village kids.
Village kids.
And we would ride our bike out to the seed corn company and throw your bike on the ground. And you had a frozen thing of Kool-Aid ice that in 100-degree temperature, as it melted, you were drinking it all day long, or water.
Wow.
And your backpack or your sandwich bag, and they'd take you out to the field. You weren't coming back till they were done.
Right. Yeah. Those were the good old days.
Yeah, that's what they tell me. It's like my father-in-law. Pam's dad, he grew up, he was a rail splitter in Tennessee, just like Abraham Lincoln,
Oh, wow.
And they would have to, they would get on a truck, they would truck them an hour out into the timber, wouldn't get paid for that, hour back, and they would work, like a 9 or 10 hour day, $1 a day. And back in his time,
that's rough.
And early Depression era. And he told me, when we got married in 81, in the early 80s, before he passed away, he said, they always keep talking about the good old days. He goes, these are the good old days.
Heck yeah. Well, that's awesome. You've definitely got quite a bit of history underneath you. And
I know a lot of people, and I have a lot of stories to tell besides the experience I've had.
And you can't get that sitting in your house all day.
No,
behind the computer.
You got to go do something.
You got to get out.
Yeah, you got to get out.
Heck yeah.
Get to know people and start a small business.
Yeah.
Has some fun.
It's a little intimidating, but if it's like, for me, I don't rely on it. So it's for me, it'll always be there.
Yep.
And then that I'd have all the other passive incomes. It's not quite as primary as it used to be, but
right.
I enjoy it. It's my escape. It's my motorcycle ride out into the country.
Well, yeah, a lot of people are involved in watching sports and doing things that really don't add to their life.
Right.
And if you took 4 hours a week, just 4 hours a week, and learned to do something and then did it. It can be anything. It could be something very unique. I have one friend, I didn't realize it till years later and never would have known it about him. He's a jeweler.
Oh, wow.
And but he's down in Southern Illinois in Cobden, I think. He's famous. He makes duck calls. He's a duck hunter, and he makes duck calls, and they're beautiful. And he puts a ring on it.
Oh.
And of course, he's a jeweler.
Yeah.
And he makes beautiful engraved rings. He'll make wedding rings for you and stuff too. But he'll still do the jewelry for you. But his duck calls are just out of sight.
Making the duck commanders look like off the shelf.
Honestly, yes. His stuff is, and he machines certain types of high-end plastic billet, and it's just gorgeous. And of course, wood, but and he has his own duck call, components.
He's still doing it?
Yes, he is.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, he is.
What's the name of the company?
Duck Band. I think it's Duck Band, B-A-N-D.
I'll have to take a look at that.
Duck Brand, yeah. But he has his really cool logo. Yeah.
Heck
Don, remember Don's last name? He's on Facebook, but he's from Urbana originally. But there's a lot of guys like that are out there.
Yeah.
One of the things I encourage people to look at for a fun thing to get into is go learn how to do glass blowing. I think that would be
My wife has inquired about that recently. I thought about buying her the equipment to have her do it from home.
I think that would be fun to learn.
And there's not a lot of investment initially out of the gate.
No, I wouldn't think so. Foundry work or doing forging. Build yourself a little forge at home and learn to do some stuff. Again, if you were a woodworker and you were doing some iron work and you were meshing that with your woodworking, I see some beautiful stuff.
I've made a few knives over the last few years.
Oh yeah.
I love it.
There's a fellow not far from here. In fact, you may even know him. I'll mention his name later, but he actually has a forge at his farm. And he takes he'll take old knife blades from like bandsaw blades.
Oh, yes.
Forge them all together and make knives.
I love that.
I think that's cool.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man.
Yeah, good fun.
There's so many opportunities for money out there. For me, the ShapeMaster was definitely inspiring.
Good.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad, too.
Yeah.
But I definitely encourage everybody to find a way of passive income. That's what I took from it all. You can have a 9-to-5 job, but you definitely don't want to rely on it, especially now what's going on with Doge. People losing their jobs. You want to have something to fall back on.
Everybody should have a side gig.
Absolutely.
I think you should have a side gig. My brother-in-law, I always loved his line. My twin nephews, he said to them, I will pay for any college degree you want to get, as long as it's not a degree where you get to say, and do you want fries with it?
I love that. I mean, yeah, I love it.
So the first thing is get a trade, learn a trade skill, learn something you can do with a wrench, or whatever, whether it's mechanic or electrician or whatever.
Learn to swing a hammer and manipulate material.
Yeah, that's right. And learn how to and learn safety, learn how to handle your body. Because if you're still a young person, I'm 64 now, but if you're still a young person, it's very important you don't injure your body.
Yeah, I learned that one the hard way.
Yep.
Yeah, my back's pretty tore up.
Right, and I did as well. And when you're self-employed, unfortunately, you will try to do things you shouldn't do.
Yes.
Yep. So
yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Yes. I appreciate it.
This was fun.
Yes, absolutely. It was a great talk. I appreciate it. I'm so glad you were available to have that talk.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's. I think this is gonna touch a lot of people, and hopefully inspire some more entrepreneurs.
Absolutely, that's the goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, thanks.
Thanks, Ken.
Yes.